Welcome to the fantasy audiobook, Batman's Owl Godfather. Chapter 61. Jin Bin, a title, means the mastermind. For 50 years, only the true controller of Hammerfell can inherit this distinguished title. Today, no one has mentioned Kingpin's real name. People only know that he came from the most chaotic black community. He relied on a pair of physical fists to smash countless people's heads before he reached his current position. No one dared to oppose him. Once Jin is displeased, death will be the greatest mercy. After all, the famous Magneto died at his hands. But this time, a blind woman dared to offend Jin Bin's authority, and even wanted to replace him. Everyone knew what was waiting for her. At this time, Kingpin was lying on his bed, enjoying the bliss brought by power, but a sudden sound of footsteps disrupted his interest. Jin Bin's face instantly sank. But because he is originally black, his dark complexion is not very obvious at this time. Kingpin waved his hand to signal the 5 women in the room to go out, and then, a frightened subordinate walked in tremblingly. "Old boss." His subordinates knelt in front of Jin Bin and almost cried, "Oh no, something happened in the arena." This sentence made Kingpin hold back the emotion he was about to have. He immediately turned over and sat up, with Dama Jin Dao sitting on the edge of the bed. "What's going on? Raise your head and speak." The men immediately raised their heads, but never dared to look at Jin Bing. But it's not that Kingpin is so scary now, the main thing is that he has no clothes on, is kneeling on his hands, and is facing him right away. Someone broke into the arena and killed all the brothers there. The subordinate closed his eyes tightly and said loudly, his voice full of fear. Kingpin enjoyed this state very much. The fear of his men was the greatest obedience to him. He did not accuse his men of closing their eyes too much. He just asked the most critical question. "Who is it? Have no idea. How many people are there? Have no idea. How did you break in? Have no idea. What the hell do I need from you?" Kingpin was furious and kicked his men far away. They were useless trash who didn't know what to do. They might as well be dragged out to feed the dinosaurs he raised. The men were kicked away, and they didn't even dare to scream. They could only crawl on the ground and tremble. Kingpin was furious and stormed out of the room. After a few minutes, he came back, put on his clothes, and walked out again. Kingpin had been mentally prepared for the tragedy in the arena, but the horror of the scene still exceeded his expectations. Dozens of corpses lay scattered on the ground, bleeding all over the ground. The faces of this group of people were full of fear, as if they died so quickly that they didn't even have time to close their eyes. "Someone has collected the body here to check the cause of death." When Kingpin arrived, everyone immediately stopped moving and stood respectfully, waiting for the boss's instructions. "What's going on?" Kingpin asked. "It's an unknown intruder." A man who looked like a little boss came to Jin Bin and tried his best to describe the current situation in a language that the boss could understand. They were killed by having their throats slit. Slit means slitting the throat, killing them with one knife. The other party took action very quickly, without any hesitation. "This is just a figure of speech, as long as you know he is very powerful. With such skill, it is impossible for someone to be unknown. Moreover, our people also fought back. They fired, but it obviously had no effect. We picked up this at the scene." After that, the little boss took out the things he picked up, which were several bullets that were severely deformed and almost completely crushed. The appearance of such a thing can only mean that the bullet hit an extremely hard object, so hard that the bullet cannot penetrate even an inch into it, and will eventually be crushed by its own kinetic energy. Kingpin asked calmly, "So what is the conclusion now?" "Our conclusion is that the intruder is a killer wearing hard armor and with absolutely top skills." Kingpin frowned and asked, "Hard armor? Where did you get this conclusion?" "Well," the little boss was stunned for a moment, then raised the bullet in his hand, "because of this." "Madness." Kingpin suddenly shouted angrily, "When can you use your brains? Only armor can stop bullets." The little boss immediately didn't dare to say anything, he just thought the boss had some great ideas. Then he saw Boss Kingpin punch his chest several times with his fist, making a banging sound. "Can't muscles do that?" The little boss didn't dare to refute. After all, the boss must think he could do it. "HMPH. Jin Bing snorted coldly, recalling the clues just now, and found the murderer in just a moment. "I know, Kingpin said, "The murderer is Wolverine." Ah, the little boss was immediately dumbfounded. He didn't know how Kingpin came to the conclusion. Although it is well known that Wolverine's bones are made of adamantium alloy and are indeed hard, the situation at the scene does not match it. And there has been no news about Wolverine for decades, right? The little boss tried to remind. Boss, if it were Wolverine's claws, there should be 3 blood marks on the body. You are stupid and you still don't admit it. Kingpin's amazing wisdom instantly activated. Can't Wolverine just stretch out one claw? His reasoning was impeccable, and Kingpin was full of confidence. Because he had received intelligence on the way here that Hawkeye and Wolverine appeared in Hammerfall. That couldn't be wrong. It must be Wolverine. As the night deepened, the spider chariot sped through the wilderness, rushing to Kingpin's lair. Don't worry, I'll rush in alone, you just need to meet me outside. Hawkeye drove the car with Logan and Bruce, with an indescribable sense of relief and pleasure in his tone. I really didn't expect that Ashley would call herself a superhero to fight Kingpin. Good, good, I'm happy to be her father. At this time, Hawkeye had no idea that his daughter didn't want to get rid of Kingpin, but wanted to be the next Kingpin. The spider chariot was very fast, and soon arrived outside the arena. According to the intelligence of the 8th generation of Ultron, Ashley's partner would be executed here tonight. The arena was brightly lit and noisy at this time, and the execution had obviously begun. Hawkeye signaled Logan and Bruce to wait in the car, and then he packed his equipment by himself and approached the arena. Kadam watched him all the way, wondering whether he should make a bet with Bruce on whether Hawkeye could come back. Hawkeye felt the changes in the outside world and moved to the edge of the arena step by step. The cheers and noise in the arena were deafening, and Hawkeye's hearing, which he relied on, was greatly affected at this time. Laugh, just laugh. Hawkeye held his breath and squatted outside the stadium, recalling the skills taught to him by the old daredevil, looking for the sound he wanted to find in countless noises. However, he found nothing. Not only that, he began to have a vague feeling. Why did the sound in the arena sound so wrong? It didn't sound like a fanatical shout from the heart, but more like acting. Not good. Suddenly, Hawkeye's alarm bells rang, and crisis and shame filled his heart at the same time. This sense of crisis comes from his realization that he has fallen into a trap. And the sense of shame comes from the fact that he has fallen into Jin Bing's trap. Hawkeye's judgment was correct. At the next moment, Kingpin's laughter came. Wearing hip-hop style short sleeves, sunglasses and a large gold chain, he appeared above the arena. Wolverine, I've been waiting for you for a long time, huh? Why is it you? He suddenly discovered that the person coming was not Wolverine but Hawkeye. Forget it, Hawkeye will be Hawkeye. As long as you can catch one person, your arrangement will be considered successful. Although it is difficult to judge why he would go to such trouble to act when he has so many subordinates, Jin Wei is very satisfied with his plan. He jumped up and landed heavily on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. At the same time, a long arrow shot through the air, and Hawkeye took action. When he knew he had fallen into a trap, he had already entered a fighting state. Jin did not dodge and let the long arrow fly. The arrow hit his body, but was suddenly bounced away without penetrating deeply. Jin Bin's body has been trained to the extreme, and his muscles are his best defense. Ha 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 ha, times have changed, old man. Jin Bin exerted all his strength and his muscles stood out. Today I will show you what the most perfect muscles are. However, upon hearing this, Hawkeye just shook his head calmly. I don't look. Kingpin was stunned and shouted, you must see it. Hawkeye took off his sunglasses, revealing his glaucoma. I'm blind. Oh, Kingpin nodded. There was nothing he could do about it. Then you really don't have to look, but you still have to die. In the distance, both Logan and Bruce saw the danger Hawkeye was in at this time. Shouldn't we save him? Bruce asked. Logan said nothing. He sat in the driver's seat, holding the steering wheel with both hands, staring in the direction of Hawkeye. But he really showed no sign of wanting to help. Kadam stood on Bruce's shoulder and sighed helplessly. Bruce, I'm afraid you're the only one who hasn't seen it clearly yet. What do you mean? Bruce didn't understand what the owl was talking about. Didn't you realize that these 2 old men are actually here to die? Kadam said, Hawkeye wants to burn himself, and Logan wants to make money and disappear from the world. Since the death of Professor X, their two goals in life are just to have a better death. These words were indeed difficult for Bruce to understand. At the age of 12, he had witnessed death and knew the value of life, so he never imagined that someone would make death their goal. Why is this happening? Bruce glanced at Hawkeye in the distance again. Because of the distance, only a small dot can be seen. Because of despair, Kadam said. You were born in Gotham. I thought you would be familiar with this. Bruce lowered his head and thought for a long time, then raised his head and said, but being beaten to death by Kingpin here doesn't count as a worthy death, right? Really? Kadam did not refute, but now the world is about to be destroyed. Even if Hawkeye survives, he still has to face this outcome. Kadam reminded Bruce long ago that if the world is destined to be destroyed, nothing can be done to change it. In order to entertain and educate, Kadam also gave an example of the Flash, which made Bruce stunned for a while. Bruce didn't understand at the time why the Flash still persisted despite failing over and over again. Now he kind of understands. Although he knew that nothing could be changed, Bruce just couldn't stand it. Is it right not to start because I know I will fail? Bruce suddenly raised his head. He probably wanted to understand why Kadam had told him so much just now. I'm going to save him. Bruce made a decision. Whether he dies or not is his business, and whether I save him or not is my business. He wouldn't be Bruce Wayne if he turned a blind eye to a vulnerable person in need. What does saving you have to do with you? By this time, Hawkeye and the Kingpin had begun fighting. Hawkeye had no choice but to deal with Kingpin, who had exercised all his muscles to the extreme. His bow and arrows were completely invulnerable, and his sword skills were useless. Kingpin had an overwhelming advantage and was about to beat Hawkeye to death. In the distance, Logan's hand grasped the steering wheel, squeezing tighter and tighter. He knew very well that the current situation was forcing him to take action. If he waited any longer, Hawkeye would really die. Uncle Logan. Suddenly, Bruce leaned over from the back seat. How long do you have to wait? Logan is still sticking to his principles. I said, I won't take action. You don't need to take action. Bruce suddenly said, just drive and leave the rest to me. Logan was stunned. He didn't expect that a child would say such words to him. On Bruce's high-spirited face, he vaguely saw his former fellow mutants. Hurry, otherwise it's too late. Logan gritted his teeth. Okay. He suddenly started the engine, and the spider chariot roared out and headed towards Hawkeye at top speed. While Kingpin was still enjoying the battle, he found a red chariot rushing towards him, and the man driving the car was Wolverine. You still dare to come? Kingpin was just about to say a few cruel words when he saw a child of about 12 years old standing up in the back seat of the chariot. Bruce drew out the Supreme Wand and pointed it at Kingpin. After reciting the levitation spell, Kingpin suddenly lost control of his body, his feet left the ground and floated in the air. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Logan grabbed Hawkeye and threw him back onto the chariot. The spider car began to move away from the arena. We have to deal with Kingpin. Hawkeye had just started to speak when he was interrupted by Bruce. Find out the target. You are here to save your daughter, not to kill Kingpin. The chariot drove towards the direction where Ashley was imprisoned, and Kingpin's men were chasing behind. Some of them ran, some rode motorcycles, and some even turned into dinosaur riders, with a running velociraptor under their seats. Kingpin himself had also been released from the floating state and rode a Tyrannosaurus Rex to catch up. Bruce stood in the back seat of the chariot, waving the Supreme Wand. Petrified, every time he waved the wand, someone fell to the ground in response. This efficiency stunned Hawkeye and Logan on the side. This kid is much more powerful than expected. As the spider chariot galloped, the group of people moved away from the arena. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the corner of the arena. Deathstroke. There was a bag next to him, filled with something unknown. Deathstroke looked at the smoke and dust in the distance, his eyes under the helmet thoughtful. Bruce used a method he had never seen before. Is it because of the short stick in his hand? Deathstroke recalled the scene of Bruce's battle just now. The other party waved the magic wand, and there was an owl beside him. This is interesting. Although bats and owls are entangled, they rarely stand in the same camp. There is obviously a problem with such a situation. Don't be careless, Deathstroke murmured. It seems that before catching Wayne, we need to consider dealing with his short stick and solving the owl. The spider chariot rushed all the way to Jinbin's base camp. The pursuers behind have been almost eliminated. Even Kingpin himself was hit by Bruce's petrification spell and dropped the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Thinking of the scene at that time, Bruce kept shaking his head in his mind. How could the evil muscles resist his righteous magic? Finally, the chariot rushed into a building. "Ashley, Daddy is here," Hawkeye shouted from the car, trying to get a response from his daughter. However, when the chariot actually rushed into the building, everything inside completely shocked them. Blood. The entire building, Jin Bin's lair, has been contaminated by blood. Countless corpses fell to the ground, with expressions of horror on their faces and wide-open eyes, as if they had seen an extremely horrific scene before they died. Hawkeye was completely stunned. Endless fear surged into his heart, and the smell of blood around him almost completely overwhelmed him. After inspection, it was found that all of these people had their throats sealed with a knife. This method was not done by Ashley. If it were Ashley, she would choose to smash someone's head. The Kingpin building was broken into from the outside and then massacred indiscriminately. If so, what happened to Ashley? Hawkeye didn't dare to think about it anymore. He jumped out of the car and rushed into the building alone. He was going to find his daughter. Vomit. Bruce lay beside the car and kept retching. This was the first time he saw such a massacre scene, and he was greatly shocked physically and mentally. The owl patted his back and said, "It's okay. You'll get used to it after seeing him a few times." "Ah!" A desperate cry came from the depths of the building. That was Hawkeye's voice. What happened is self-evident. Logan lowered his face, pulled down his hat, and blocked his eyes, as if he was also feeling sorry for his old friend. Even Kadam felt that Hawkeye was a bit pitiful. In this world, we cannot expect any good results. Hawkeye is the perfect example. Failure to save Ashley, Hawkeye's old age and the loss of his daughter, and the white-haired man sending the black-haired man away, is undoubtedly a tragedy. But if Ashley is saved, the daughter will kill her father to establish her power. When Hawkeye sees Ashley's true face, he will be more sad than heartbroken. Either way, Hawkeye will only experience pain. Kadam sighed. At least now Hawkeye still thinks that his daughter died as a hero. This is somewhat lucky. Bruce didn't answer. He had slowly adapted to the environment and gradually stopped retching. Then a question appeared in his mind. Who did this? Bruce suddenly asked. It can't be Kingpin's enemy seeking revenge on this day, right? At this time, Bruce felt a danger everywhere. This feeling, just like the first time I met Jason, was a spiritual feeling caused by magic. Bad induction. Bruce could faintly realize that a great terror was slowly approaching him. I don't know who it is, but there is no doubt that it is the pursuer sent by Barbados. Kadam looked around. This cold-blooded and ruthless killing method reminded him of many people. Lei Xiaogu, Sharp Claw, Mr. Zass. This time, I'm afraid we have to think about the worst. Kadam said seriously, let's tentatively designate the opponent as Deathstroke. Death Knell. Bruce had no idea how dangerous this man was, but he believed in one thing. There are only wrong names, not wrong nicknames. The person who can be called Death Knell is by no means an ordinary person. Kadam, I've always been curious. At this time, Bruce suddenly said the question that had been hidden in his heart for a long time. How on earth did Barbados send people here? I mean, he can't even get through, but he can send people here, and he can accurately find our world every time. I don't know, Kadam said. No, you know, Bruce retorted, you knew from the first day we crossed over that there would be pursuers coming. I don't know, Kadam still said the same thing. But Bruce remembered more suspicious places. At first, I found the sealing location of Barbados according to the records in ancient books, but in the end, when the seal was lifted, it was you who flew out. Bruce asked, Kadam, have you known Barbados for a long time? What stories do you have with him? Well, since you asked so, I won't hide it from you. Kadam suddenly showed a nostalgic expression, a long, long time ago. Forget it, stop making up stories. Bruce sighed suddenly, if you don't want to tell me the truth, I can only explain that you don't believe me now. It doesn't matter, let's talk about it later. He knew that he couldn't get the truth from Kadam now because he wasn't strong enough. And Bruce didn't want to doubt the owl. Bruce learned his lesson from the time he doubted Dumbledore. Overly paranoid suspicion will only lead to bad results. Bruce stopped asking, but he still said to himself, however, is there a possibility that you have been captured by Barbados and have a very humiliating history? Kadam's eyes widened. What the hell? What a rebellion. Can you, Bruce, say this without changing your face now? Kadam had already begun to mourn for Bruce's future enemies. The Batman they were going to face probably wouldn't be very rude. They walked into the building and found Hawkeye in grief. He was holding his daughter's body and wailing in tears. Logan squatted beside his old friend, patting his shoulder without saying a word. At this time, Kadam looked around and found that there was something wrong with this room. This is not a cell, he said. Look at the layout, it looks like Kingpin's vault. Indeed, there were many gold bars scattered around, as well as some collections that were too large to be taken away. Now, things were much clearer. When the enemy invaded, Esli actually had a chance to escape, but she did not choose to escape. Instead, she ran to Kingpin's vault and wanted to fish in troubled waters. Unfortunately, her and the enemy's targets happened to overlap, and the two met, and Esli suffered this misfortune. It's really pitiful. Kadam sighed indifferently, and then flew around the vault a few times. Sure enough, he found something. They only took small and valuable items. They had a clear goal and left without any delay. It was really Deathstroke's style. Before arresting Bruce, he first got some money and made a plan. This is not something that ordinary villains can do. Kadam fell to the ground, and there was a helmet in front of him. From Magneto. Unfortunately, Deathstroke is not a local, and he misjudged the value of the items. Kadam picked up the helmet and stuffed the feathers into it, then I can only accept the rest with great reluctance. Magneto's helmet looks ordinary from the outside, but it has the ability to completely resist mental invasion. Kadam has always been curious about what this helmet is made of and what the principle is. Now that the thing is in his hands, he will let Bruce study it in the future, and his batsuit will have an extra function. After putting away the helmet, there are two things that caught Kadam's attention. The first is a slate. The slate is diamond-shaped and full of ancient hieroglyphs. At the top of the slate, there is an eye. Kadam didn't recognize it at first glance, and after a long time of recalling, he remembered what it was. The Slate of Life. The slate comes from a villain named Silvermane in Marvel. He found the secret of returning to youth from this slate, and kidnapped Dr. Kurt Connors. According to the content of the slate, he made a youth serum. Kurt Connors is the classic villain Professor Lizard of Spider-Man. The slate that can make people return to youth is undoubtedly of extraordinary value. Kingpin probably couldn't interpret the content on it, so he threw it in the vault. Kadam put it away without hesitation. Now the slate is his. If he can interpret the content on it in the future, let the old man in Hogwarts try the efficacy of the medicine. After putting away the slate, the last thing that attracted Kadam's attention was an egg. This egg is very big, even bigger than Kadam's owl. Thinking of the group of dinosaurs raised by Kingpin, Kadam has reason to suspect that this is a dinosaur egg. I just don't know why it was put in the vault. Based on the principle of taking the wrong one and not letting it go, Kadam also put this egg away. Later, you can ask Hagrid to hatch it and see what can be hatched. If it is really just an ordinary dinosaur, then give it to Hagrid as a gift. Anyway, he always wants to raise a dragon, and a dinosaur is also a dragon. However, just when Kadam put away the dinosaur egg, Bruce finally couldn't bear it anymore. It's fine that the owl always stuffed some weird things into its feathers before, but now this egg is obviously bigger than it, and it can still be stuffed into feathers. Kadam. Bruce thought about it and said carefully, as far as I know, female owls hatch eggs, and this shouldn't be an owl egg. What nonsense are you talking about? Kadam frowned. Of course I know this is not an owl egg. Then you. Bruce hesitated, thought about it, and finally didn't say it. Bruce also knew that Kadam used the traceless extension spell to transform feathers into storage space. But no matter what, the things collected are still on Kadam, not in another space. Bruce really wanted to ask Kadam. You put an egg in the feathers close to your body like this, what if something is accidentally hatched, what will you do? Back to the other side. Hawkeye hugged his daughter, his tears had dried up, and he hadn't walked out of his sadness. He was filled with endless regret. If he had come earlier, perhaps the tragedy would not have happened. Logan squatted beside him, pressed his shoulders, and said nothing. After a long time, Hawkeye finally came to his senses, wiped away his tears, and walked out of the vault holding his daughter's body. After the sadness, he still had to continue his journey. Bruce followed behind and couldn't help asking Katem, "Do you know who the murderer is?" Hawkeye can't not want to avenge his daughter. "I can't say." Katem flew in the sky and shook his head and said, "Anyway, no matter who it is, I just hope it's not Deathstroke." "Why?" Bruce asked back, "You have been mentioning the name of Deathstroke since before. Is he really scary?" "Whether it is scary or not is secondary. The key is the armor on his body." Bruce was puzzled. "What's wrong with the armor?" Katem thought about it and told Bruce the truth. Deathstroke's armor is made of promethium alloy. Promethium metal is also one of the 5 major metals in the metal event. Along with Dionysus factor, amber gold, bat gold, and nth metal. If these 5 metals exist in Bruce's body at the same time, the door to the dark multiverse will be opened, allowing Barbados and his men to descend directly. The last time Jason chased him, he brought the Dionysus factor. Now if the second pursuer also brings another metal, then Katem has to wonder if Barbados is playing tricks. Promethium metal. Bruce silently recited the name of the metal, and then asked, "What abilities do these 5 metals have?" The Dionysus factor has the ability to resurrect, immortalize, and heal itself, so what about the others? It's a bit difficult to explain. Each metal does not have only a single ability. Katem made a simple summary, which is not 100% accurate, but it is convenient for Bruce to remember. The Dionysus factor can make people immortal and have the ability to heal themselves, while amber gold can make people stay young forever. In other words, one is immortal and the other is immortal. Then nth metal can subvert magic and gravity. It is generally used to make armor, defend magic, and can fly. Bat gold is the perfect material for casting spells, and it has extremely strong magical power. Finally, there is promethium metal, which is indestructible and can withstand huge physical and energy attacks. It is generally used to make weapons and combat uniforms. After saying this, Katem himself was also a little emotional. These 5 metals are extremely rare and precious materials when taken individually, but when they are put together, plus Batman, they will become the door to the dark universe and the most unlucky thing in the entire universe. If possible, let Bruce stay away from these things. Of course, we don't have to worry so much. At the end, Katem laughed and said, "The person who comes may not be Deathstroke, and we probably won't encounter promethium metal." "You can't say that." Bruce didn't buy it. "Always plan for the worst possible scenario, didn't you tell me so?" Okay. Katem had to admit that Bruce had indeed grown a lot more than before. They followed Hawkeye out, got on the spider chariot, and returned to Hammerfall. The story that happened afterwards was naturally very heavy. Hawkeye went to save his daughter, but in the end he only brought back his daughter's body. No matter how sad he was still accused and scolded by his ex-wife Toya. In great grief, Hawkeye led them to leave Hammerfall and continue to the new utopia. The spider chariot galloped and arrived at the former Mount Rushmore. The portraits of 4 presidents, Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt and Lincoln, were carved on the mountain. In addition, there was a 5th newly carved president, whose portrait was much larger than the previous 4. He was the current president, Red Skull. When the chariot passed Mount Rushmore, Hawkeye's blind eyes stared accurately in the direction of the Red Skull's portrait. A trace of determination flashed across his face. "Red Skull, wait for me." What exactly is the hatred between Hawkeye and Red Skull? He has never said it clearly. The truth of the Avengers, Annihilation, has not been revealed yet. This is Hawkeye's secret, and he seems unwilling to say it. Now the journey is halfway through, and they will soon reach the new utopia. But now, the group has encountered a little trouble. A Tyrannosaurus Rex with a body length of more than 10 meters is chasing after the spider chariot. Hawkeye has stepped on the accelerator to the bottom, but still can't get rid of it. Is it Kingpin's pursuers? It doesn't seem like it. Bruce would rather believe that they simply provoked a wild Tyrannosaurus Rex. I wanted to ask this a long time ago. Bruce sat in the back seat and kept looking back at the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Where did these dinosaurs come from? Even if the United States has become a wasteland, there is no reason for extinct dinosaurs to appear. What are you dissatisfied with dinosaurs? Kadam turned his head behind him and observed the back with Bruce. Strictly speaking, I am also a dinosaur. Birds are descendants of dinosaurs. While the two of them chattered, the Tyrannosaurus behind them began to mutate. A black substance like oil began to spread on the Tyrannosaurus, as if it had life, and soon wrapped around the Tyrannosaurus. Symbiote. Kadam recognized the true face of the substance. At this time, Hawkeye finally understood why they were targeted. So that's it, he said. A few years ago, I burned a bunch of symbiotes to death. Now it seems that they were not burned clean. Hawkeye did not get out of the pain of losing his daughter, but he knew that he had no time to be sad now, and there were more important things to do. So he suppressed his sadness in his heart, and now everything seems normal. Unless Hawkeye can see the murderer who killed his daughter. On the other side, hearing Hawkeye's explanation, Logan cursed directly, "You implicated us." "Then I apologize," Hawkeye said lightly. "Now is not the time to blame each other, the most important thing is that we escape from the pursuit." Logan's eyes widened. "You really know how to talk. There is no mutual accusation. Aren't we accusing you?" The chariot was speeding, but it could not get rid of the symbiote Tyrannosaurus Rex behind it, and the distance between the two sides was getting closer and closer, and it was about to be caught up. Hawkeye suddenly turned his head to Logan. "Logan, I am very happy to travel with you all this way. We only have one way now, which may solve our crisis, but you have to make a little sacrifice." "Shut up." Logan cursed and didn't want to listen. He could probably guess what Hawkeye was up to. That is to let the Tyrannosaurus Rex eat Logan, and then Logan used his self-healing ability to complete regeneration in the opponent's stomach, and then break out of the body. "I tell you clearly, don't even think about it." Logan felt sick just thinking about that picture. He would not take action, even if the opponent was just a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Hawkeye whistled. "Then there is no way. It is my honor to die with you, but it's a pity for Bruce, he is still a child." Bruce frowned. He didn't hear any tension from Hawkeye, as if the problem had been solved. Maybe Hawkeye has a backup plan. Thinking of this, Bruce's action of pulling out the wand slowed down. Sure enough, just after turning a corner, a man appeared on the road in front of them. He stood in front, wearing a black battlesuit and wrapped in a cape. This temperament reminded Bruce of Batman. Hawkeye seemed to have known that such a person existed a long time ago. He turned the steering wheel in advance and bypassed the man. When the chariot passed by the man, Hawkeye put his two fingers together and made a salute gesture. "Please, Black Bolt, Black Bolt." When Bruce heard the name, before he could react, Kadam began to fan the flames in his ears. "How bold," said the owl. "You only dare to call yourself Batman, but he dares to call himself Black Bolt. This is obviously to suppress you. Can you tolerate it? What is going on?" Bruce didn't want to listen to Owl's nonsense. The chariot had already driven behind Black Bolt, and the symbiote dinosaur came to the front. Black Bolt raised his head lightly, suddenly spoke, and uttered a sentence, "You can't pass." Boom! In an instant, a huge sound wave energy rushed out, and the symbiote was directly torn into countless pieces, and the huge Tyrannosaurus Rex also exploded and died. A bloody rain fell from the sky, and Black Bolt stood in it, like a hellish killer. "Good job, Black Bolt." Kadam suddenly started to scream, "You are much better than a certain bat, I have been your fan for 50 years. Bruce silently covered Owl's mouth, listening to it was really annoying. Bruce and his group followed Black Bolt into a building. This building was extremely secretive and almost integrated with the wilderness environment. A beautiful woman wearing a white tight battle suit and a slim figure sat in the top seat of the hall. "Emma." Hawkeye enthusiastically called out the woman's name. Logan behind him frowned, his eyes filled with unspeakable disgust. "Emma Frost, a mutant, codenamed White Queen, has telepathic abilities and can turn her body into diamonds." Emma ignored Hawkeye and greeted Logan instead. Logan looked at White Queen with an impolite look. 50 years have passed, and you haven't aged at all." "Telepathy, Logan." White Queen smiled faintly. "I can make others see what I want them to see." Of course she is old. But she uses telepathic abilities to make everyone only see her former beauty. But this does not include Kadam. Not only that, Kadam took out Magneto's helmet from under his feathers and put it on Bruce's head. In an instant, Bruce was like the protagonist of the movie The Shining, watching a beautiful young woman turn into a skinny old woman. And this old woman had an extremely exaggerated makeup on her face. Bruce tried his best to act as if nothing had happened. At this time, the White Queen was still talking to Logan and the others. So, what exactly do you want to do when you pass through my territory? Just passing by, Logan said lightly. We will leave soon. In Logan's eyes, the White Queen still looked as beautiful as ever. Her eyes moved, she glanced at Hawkeye beside Logan, and chuckled. Why, Clint, you still haven't given up that ridiculous idea. Do you still want to snatch the head of Galactus from the Red Skull? Suddenly, Kadam sat up straight on Bruce's shoulder. What's going on? Did he hear it right? The invincible Galactus died again. Clint, what's going on? Logan asked with a low face. You never told me about this. This was the first time he had heard anything about Galactus. Hawkeye had been almost tight-lipped before. Shouldn't you give us an explanation? Don't get excited, Logan. Hawkeye signaled Logan to calm down. It's not too late now, I have no intention of involving you. Calm down, calm down. After that, he pondered for a moment, organized his words, and began to explain the situation to Logan and Bruce. The head of Planet Devourer suddenly appeared 10 years ago. As Hawkeye told the story, Kadam gradually came to know the whole story. Not only that, but based on the known comic plot, he also thought of more. In fact, the head of this Galactus does not belong to Galactus in this time, but comes from the future. There are 3 stories in the Sunset Red universe. The protagonists are Hawkeye in his later years, Logan in his later years and Star-Lord in his later years. The story of Duskok took place 5 years ago. It is the story of Hawkeye seeking revenge for his former teammates after learning that he was about to lose his sight. The Avengers were destroyed because of the betrayal of the Thunderbolts, so Hawkeye single-handedly killed all the survivors of the Thunderbolts, including Bullseye and Baron Zemo, and successfully avenged his teammates. The story of Twilight Wolf is what is happening now. Finally, there was the late Star-Lord. 5 years later, the invincible Galactus invaded the Earth with his Church of Cosmic Truth, and the late Star-Lord prevented this crisis. The solution was for Star-Lord to shoot Galactus in the head in the end, allowing him to have a lot of imagination. The bullet he fired at that time was a fragment of a time stone. It was this fragment of the time stone that, although it killed Galactus, brought Galactus' head back to the past 15 years ago. Swallowing Star went from being enlightened to being confused. After returning to the past, his head fell into the hands of the Red Skull. Speaking of swallowing stars, it is also miserable. Although his status is superior, his combat power is erratic. He feeds on the life energy of the planet, and his power can reach infinity when he is full. The problem is that he can't get enough. Therefore, he is often reduced to a unit of measurement of combat power, and he has died countless times in the history of the Marvel Universe. Tangxing is so pitiful, what can he eat? Kadam sighed. Forget it if you are killed, your body and head will have to be separated after death, and even the coffin will have to be packed in the future. Bruce glanced at the owl, wondering why his brain circuitry was always so weird. Hawkeye continued his story. The god's head was very big, even bigger than an ordinary building, and it contained special power. After Red Skull got it, he saw the future. He didn't see himself in the future picture. From then on, the Red Skull understood that if he died in the future, he would be killed by someone in at most 15 years. He was unwilling to accept this fate, so he started a crazy plan. Hawkeye paused for a moment, then continued. He wants to transform the head of Galactus into a weapon capable of destroying everything. Only in this way will no one be able to kill him. Hearing this, Logan asked, "How do you know these things?" Hawkeye made no secret of this. "You should have seen reports in newspapers before about the Red Skull labeling an area as a rebel and then erasing it indiscriminately, right?" Logan and Bruce nodded. They had indeed seen it. Those people who were erased were once my teammates. Hawkeye finally revealed the answer at this time. His tone became lower. "They are good. They exposed the Red Skull's conspiracy, and vowed to stop it, but unfortunately it was still a step too late. The Red Skull took action in advance. This is why Hawkeye came to find Logan and said he wanted to do something big." Kadam frowned and looked at Hawkeye, feeling something bad. No matter which universe he is in, Hawkeye has a certain law of cause and effect. In the MCU universe, Hawkeye has set up the flag many times, showing that he is about to receive his lunch. As a result, in Avengers 2, Quicksilver died after saving him, and in Avengers 4, Natasha also died after saving him. As for Hawkeye himself, after defeating Thanos, he is still alive and kicking. He still has time to take on an apprentice and experience retirement life. In this universe, Hawkeye still has this trait. Be it the Avengers or the anti-Red Skull rebels, these were all once teammates of Hawkeye, but they were all destroyed by the ruthless group. But Hawkeye himself was still standing before them alive. Just outrageous. Tatum must now face a question: will such a group destruction happen for the third time? Now they are Hawkeye's teammates. Tatum whispered, Hawkeye, it turns out that you are the most unlucky existence in the entire Marvel. When Bruce heard this, he didn't know why. Tatum didn't explain. Anyway, he was confident. At worst, he would lead Bruce to victory in the end. As long as they turn quickly enough, danger will always be one step behind them. When Hawkeye finished telling the Red Skull's conspiracy, Logan was silent. He began to realize how dangerous what Hawkeye was doing was, and he was afraid that he was ready to never return. Eagle Eye. Logan looked at this old friend and seemed to want to say something. But after a long silence, he sighed and said, good luck to you. I've already said that I will never do it again. It's okay. I understand you. Hawkeye was very free and easy, and did not force Logan to help him. They rested for a while in the White Queen's base, and then prepared to continue. Just as they were about to leave, the White Queen Emma called Logan. Although she was an old woman in Bruce's eyes, she was still young and beautiful in Logan's eyes. It felt like an American horror story. Logan. The White Queen smiled and asked a question: have you found the life you want? Do you have a place to go? Logan looked at this mutant traitor, and still had no good face. He did not answer directly, but said, you can read my heart and see for yourself. The White Queen looked at Logan quietly. No one knew whether she read Logan's heart, but in the end, the White Queen showed a satisfied smile on her face. That's great. The spider chariot set off again. This time it was Logan who drove, and Hawkeye sat in the co-pilot to rest. Tatum in the back seat stared at Hawkeye, as if he wanted to see the power of causality from him. Would Hawkeye really not be wiped out with them? As if he felt the gaze from behind, Hawkeye turned back and smiled at Bruce. He thought it was Bruce looking at him. Speaking of Bruce, he is such a good boy. Although he is young, he has a heart to be a hero and protect others. Unconsciously, Hawkeye thought of his daughter, Ashley. She also died as a hero. Hawkeye took out a mechanical watch from his arms. This was a relic of Ashley, and Hawkeye kept it as a memorial. Aisley. He stroked the mechanical watch, missing his daughter. But as he stroked it, he suddenly found something wrong. Hawkeye found an extremely hidden part in the strap of the mechanical watch. He used his fingers to determine what it was. Why does this look like a bug? Stab. Logan slammed on the brakes, and the spider chariot's tires scraped a long track with the ground. What bug? Logan turned his head and looked at the thing in Hawkeye's hand. It was a very small part, and it would have been impossible to find it without a hawk's eye touching it with his hands. Maybe it was set by Ashley's opponent. Eagle Eye felt sad in his heart and casually crushed the bug. This kid is still too careless. He doesn't even know he's been bugged. Alas. It's no wonder that Ashley was eventually captured by the Kingpin. Hawkeye and Logan did not pay much attention to the bug because they naturally felt that the bug was not meant for them. The two old men didn't have any secrets, so they had nothing to eavesdrop on. Only Tatum realized something was wrong after seeing the bug. Something is wrong. The technological content of this bug is a bit too high for this world. It's impossible for Ashley, a little gangster, to provoke such an opponent. Tatum. Bruce called an owl, and he also noticed something was wrong. To put things in the worst direction, this bug was not placed by Ashley's opponent. But it was the murderer who killed Ashley. Tatum's heart sank. After killing the enemy, he still thought of placing a bug on her body. This kind of careful thinking, coupled with the skills he had shown before. The pursuers coming this time may really be death knell. Tatum began to think about it again and again. What could Deathstroke eavesdrop on them? The answer is obvious. Regarding what Hawkeye told before, the secrets of Galactus and Red Skull. If it was Deathstroke, what would he do after knowing this? Kadam began to bring himself into Deathstroke's perspective and began to consider subsequent changes. Although Deathstroke is here to hunt down Bruce, he will not take action easily until he has a satisfactory plan. So when he takes action, he must already have absolute confidence. Kadam reluctantly raised his head and looked at Hawkeye. Is the law of cause and effect on this guy still about to activate? The new utopia is getting closer. Bruce and his team came to the famous Ant-Man crossing, and then they saw the skeleton of a giant creature lying across the crossroads. This is the corpse of Ant-Man who died after becoming giant. This picture shocked Logan and Bruce, and they finally understood the meaning of this place name. Because two roads cross under the corpse, it is named Ant-Man Crossing. Ant-Man is a veteran member of the Avengers. Hawkeye has never explained it before because he couldn't say it. As he passed Ant-Man's crossroads, Logan took off his hat and observed a moment of silence. The atmosphere in the car was a little heavy for a moment, except for the roar of the tank's engine. After passing the Ant-Man crossing, the silhouette of a majestic city is already in sight. New Utopia. When the chariot entered, Logan was immediately stunned by the prosperity of the city. As expected of the city where the president is located, even compared to 50 years ago, it does not show any inferiority. In the center of the city of New Babylon, there is a huge statue of the Great Red Skull president. He raised his left hand high and grabbed countless enemies who had opposed him. New Babylon is a city that belongs entirely to the Red Skull. At this time, in the presidential palace of New Babylon, the Red Skull is standing in his showroom, quietly looking at his collection. In front of him is a huge display case containing the relics of the superheroes who have opposed him for 50 years. Iron Man's suit, Doctor Strange's cape, Spider-Man's mask, Thor's helmet. At the top of the display case is a round shield with a star pattern painted on it. This shield belongs to the Red Skull's former enemy, Captain America. 50 years ago, the burning White House. Captain America fell to the ground, unable to resist at all. The Red Skull clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the spiritual leader of the superhero, feeling infinite pleasure in his heart. If I knew you were so vulnerable, I should have united all the villains long ago. The Red Skull looked down at Captain America. From now on, this country belongs to us, and I will divide your beloved America into several pieces and distribute them to my men. They are all criminals who commit all kinds of evil. I believe that after occupying the country, they will bring endless humiliation to this once beautiful country. Steve, how are you feeling now? Captain America no longer had any strength to speak, and 2 lines of unwilling tears slowly flowed down. Don't hope for any miracles. Even God cannot reverse the outcome of this battle, because God is not at home. Red Skull said, slowly approaching Captain America, don't be afraid, it will be quick. After saying that, he pressed the thumbs of both hands on Captain America's eyes. Then use force suddenly. After being transformed by the serum, the strength far beyond that of ordinary people can be released without reservation. Captain America screamed in agony, and in endless pain, his head was crushed by the Red Skull. Time returns to the present. On the Red Skull's face, he was wearing Captain America's former mask. Not only that, he is also wearing Captain America's suit, which was ripped off from his opponent and is absolutely authentic. The hood was stained with blood and the color was old. For 50 years, Red Skull had not even washed this hood. Red Skull's ancestors would peel off their skins after killing their enemies. His behavior of wearing Captain America's uniform now was to imitate his ancestors. If it were me now, even if I competed with Steve openly, I could easily defeat him. Red Skull muttered to himself, with endless satisfaction in his tone, I have far surpassed Captain America. Who else in the world can be greater than him now? He was trapped in his own world and couldn't extricate himself. It took a long time for him to withdraw his thoughts with satisfaction. The star-devouring weapon has been successfully developed, and no one can kill him anymore. The future scene that he saw at the time will never become a reality. Never again. Never. He, Red Skull, has become the strongest among the strong. However, at this moment, have you finished reading? A voice came, a completely unfamiliar voice, with a hint of mechanical reverberation. Red Skull got goosebumps all over his body. He turned around suddenly and saw a man standing in the corner of the showroom. He was wearing tactical armor and a yellow and black mask. Deathstroke folded his hands in front of his chest and leaned quietly in the corner of the room. "Who are you?" Red Skull asked loudly. "How did you get in? How long has he been in there, and he didn't even notice it?" The president who just claimed to be the strongest has now fallen into a huge panic. Insecurity completely surrounded him, and Red Skull's hands and feet were cold. "Don't worry, I just came to discuss a deal with you," Deathstroke said softly. "What deal?" "I need some of your resources as president." Deathstroke slowly approached Red Skull. "In exchange, you can get my thanks." "Your thanks?" The Red Skull seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. "How on earth did you get in?" While speaking, Red Skull had already started his own actions. He suddenly reached out his hand, broke the glass of the display case, and pulled out the sword in the stone that once belonged to Captain Britain. This magical weapon, which can split the barriers of the universe, has long been turned into scrap metal due to the death of its master. Now in the hands of the Red Skull, it can only be regarded as a sharp blade. But that's enough. The Red Skull twisted around and swung his sword, trying to cut off the enemy's body, but just before the sword in the stone was swung out, a cold light flashed, and a sword blade was already across the Red Skull's neck. He drew his sword quickly, but unfortunately Deathstroke was even faster. "Don't be so unkind." Deathstroke applied a little force, and the blade pressed into the Red Skull's skin, oozing out a few traces of blood. He said without any emotion, "Put down the sword and let's talk." Red Skull's expression did not change at all. As the president of a country, can a mere death threat threaten him? Red Skull has his own principles, and his principle is that peace is the most important thing. With a clang, the sword in the stone was thrown to the ground. Deathstroke raised his toes, and the sword in the stone flew up and fell into his hand. "What a nice weapon." Deathstroke admired the sword in the stone and naturally put it behind his back. "It's his now. Let's get back to the business we just had." Deathstroke retracted his sword. "Don't feel humiliated. You will have to thank me in the end." The Red Skull took a few steps back, clutching his neck, breathing heavily. He really felt death just now. "What do you want?" Red Skull's tone was mixed with fear. "Is it money? Or territory?" He just wants to send this guy away as soon as possible. It doesn't matter even if he bleeds heavily, as long as he can send this plague god away. Then we'll deal with the incompetent security personnel in the presidential palace. Their most beloved president was almost assassinated, and these people didn't even notice. "Don't rush to ask me what I want." Deathstroke always took the initiative in the conversation. "You made a god-level weapon and you want to use it to save your life. How did you know?" Red Skull thought of the rebels he had wiped out. "Are there any survivors?" But after he asked this question, a cold light flashed before his eyes again. Red Skull didn't even see Deathstroke draw his sword, and there was a bloody streak on his face. "Don't answer questions with questions. Deathstroke's patience has reached its limit. You should have discovered by yourself that this method is useless. For example, your life is now in my hands. This is true. The weapon made from the head of Galactus is extremely powerful, but at the price, it is also very large and cannot be carried around. Once the Red Skull is assassinated at close range, the weapon becomes a decoration. I can tell you how to deal with this problem, and I can even tell you who is trying to deal with you now." Seeing that Red Skull was already hesitating, Deathstroke finally stated his terms of the deal. "But in exchange, your next actions must be under my command." New Babylon, a bar. When Bruce and his party arrived at New Utopia, it was time for them to say goodbye. Hawkeye's next move was not intended to be followed by anyone. Several of them sat together, with Hawkeye and Logan each having a large glass of beer in front of them. Bruce was too young, so Hawkeye only ordered him a glass of juice, but Bruce didn't want to drink it, so he had to let Katum hold a straw in his mouth and slurp up the juice. "It's time for us to say goodbye here." Hawkeye raised the beer in front of Logan and motioned for the two to clink glasses. "Are you still unwilling to tell me what happened to you that made you decide not to take action?" "There's nothing to say." Logan toasted with Hawkeye and drank the beer in one gulp. He lit up a low-quality cigar, took a long puff, blew out the smoke ring, and sighed. Logan closed his eyes, painful memories reappearing in front of him. It's just a little bit of wind and frost. Although Logan said this, his voice was obviously wrong. Hawkeye shook his head and said softly, "Speak out, you are almost at your limit. Keeping the past in your heart will only crush you completely." Logan opened his eyes. "I can tell you everything." He looked at Bruce and warned solemnly, "Boy, listen carefully, if you want to be a superhero, these will be your inevitable fate. If you are confused, don't embark on this path easily." Next, Rogan told a nightmare-like story. "I thought it was just a normal night before it happened." Logan leaned back on his chair and said slowly, "That night, an emergency alarm was issued in Xavier Academy for geniuses, and countless criminals invaded the academy." He did not back down when faced with these heinous criminals. The angry Logan stretched out his steel claws and fought with the criminals with a mentality of desperation. In order to protect the students, he kept killing, and the blood stained his body red until he killed the last invading criminal, Bullseye. "This is impossible." Hawkeye suddenly realized something was wrong. "Bullseye lived until 5 years ago. I killed him with my own hands." At that time, he had just lost his sight and started the final duel with Bullseye. Hawkeye wins by aiming for Bullseye's heart and then shooting him in the head. "Yeah, this only shows that I didn't kill Bullseye." Logan's breathing became heavy, his body trembled, and his fists clenched. "Not only is Bullseye fake, but so are the other criminals. They are all hallucinations I saw." Logan shed tears, but he didn't even notice. "The true identities of those criminals are all my teammates and children from the academy." Hearing this, Bruce was completely speechless. He couldn't imagine what kind of hell scene it was, destroying everything he wanted to protect with his own hands. If it were him, he would definitely collapse on the spot. "When I got to the last person, the hallucination disappeared." Logan recalled painfully, "I saw Professor X lying in a pool of blood. His eyes were more desperate than mine, because those illusions were all created by him. The mastermind behind everything is the criminal master of illusions, who uses his illusions to control Professor X, just like what happened in X-Men 2. On this night, the X-Men were wiped out, leaving only Professor X and Wolverine, whose faith had completely collapsed. They knew what we were capable of and everything was orchestrated." Logan said, "If Professor. That's why Professor X and I were selected and became the executioners of this massacre. From that day on, the professor went completely crazy, and I still live in a state of confusion until now." Logan took Hawkeye's beer and drank it again. After telling what had happened in the past, he felt relaxed for the first time. "Bruce, think about it yourself." Logan finally said, "When you become a hero and your enemies can't do anything to you, they will attack those around you. The hero's path represents eternal loneliness." Bruce said nothing. He didn't know if he could bear the price. The night is getting darker. Bruce and his friends were about to leave the bar, and they formally said goodbye at this time. "I'm going to complete my mission." Hawkeye waved to them, "Logan, everything is over. You have to look forward. When I complete my mission, it will be equivalent to revenge for you. The Red Skull is the biggest mastermind behind the scenes. Killing the Red Skull will end everything." After saying his final goodbyes, Hawkeye turned and walked toward the door. When he came to the street, he found no one. "It feels so quiet, and there are no people from New Utopia on the street." Hawkeye sighed in his heart for a moment, then withdrew his thoughts, "I have to work hard next." At this time, Logan and Bruce had arrived outside the bar. They watched Hawkeye's back, knowing that he had embarked on a road of no return. Bruce asked Katum, "Is this the end of a hero?" Infinite sadness arose in his heart, as if he had already seen his future. However, this sadness did not last long, and sudden changes occurred. A black car suddenly appeared at the intersection, the door opened, and several men armed with machine guns got out. Eagle Eye immediately realized something was wrong and rolled over directly into the grass on the side of the road. And Logan instantly protected Bruce in his arms. Bang 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 bang. The machine gun fired continuously, and countless bullets hit Logan's back. He groaned, and his back was stained red with blood. "Logan," Bruce roared, "it's okay." Logan gritted his teeth and said, "Just a bullet can't kill me." Having said that, the pained expression on his face cannot be faked. At the same time, several hidden arrows were fired from the grass, accurately hitting the criminals. Their lives were taken away before they had time to react. The driver of the black car stepped on the accelerator and sped away without looking back. Hawkeye did not come out of the grass, he was still on guard for possible enemies. Logan stood up tremblingly. He held back his strength and used all his strength to expel the bullets from his back one by one. "We're being targeted." Logan, who has extensive experience in injuries, immediately made a judgment. "You have to leave quickly, it's not safe here anymore." "No, it's too late." Bruce shook his head. He had already seen more black cars coming this way. The convoy stopped at the intersection, and the Red Skull stepped out of the car at the front. When he saw this person, Logan frowned suddenly. The grass on the roadside was shaking, and it was obvious that Hawkeye was very excited at this time. The target of his trip actually dared to appear directly in front of him, just exposed within the range of his eagle eye. And at this moment, an incendiary bomb flew at extremely high speed from an extremely tricky angle, hitting Kadam flying in the sky without missing a beat. Googa! Kadam let out a strange scream and fell from midair. Then his body began to burn, and every feather was stained with flames, as if he would not stop until he was burned out. Kadam! At this moment, Bruce's eyes were filled with tears. Logan's warning just now still rings in his ears. If you want to be a hero, you must be prepared to lose those around you. But Bruce didn't expect it to come so quickly. Kadam, hold on, I can save you. Bruce immediately wanted to use magic to summon a water column to extinguish the flames on Kadam. Then the next moment, he heard Kadam's strange cry, "Bruce, I'm on fire." The voice was full of energy, and it didn't sound like anything was wrong. And this guy can also direct Bruce's actions through telepathy. Don't cast spells without a wand, pull out the supreme wand. Why? Bruce didn't understand why Kadam said this, but he pulled out his wand anyway. At this moment, a gunshot sounded from another corner. The bullet broke through the air and accurately hit the wand in Bruce's hand. The legendary supreme wand was instantly broken into two pieces. Bruce finally understood Kadam's intention at this time. The enemy is coming for his wand. He looked in the direction of the gunfire and saw a figure appearing on the roof. The one eye under the yellow and black helmet was staring at him coldly. Bruce had no doubt that these were Barbados' pursuers. Kadam's helpless voice sounded in his ears. "Oh, it's really the death knell, can't I guess wrong once?" The owl, covered in flames, flew to Bruce again. This sight made Deathstroke frown. "Can't this owl be burned to death?" "Forget it, the short stick that can take care of Bruce will do." In the grass, Hawkeye has already drawn his bow and nocked an arrow. He aimed at the Red Skull's head, ready to deliver a fatal blow. Red Skull knew that Hawkeye was in the grass, but he had no intention of hiding it. Not only that, he actually laughed. "Eagle Eye, you are looking at me." After saying that, the Red Skull suddenly pulled open his uniform and exposed his chest. A pair of precise instruments was ticking on his chest. At the same time, there was a rumbling sound in the distance, and a huge shadow rose from the ground and flew high into the sky. It was a huge head, as high as 4 or 5 stories high. When it rose, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. The head has been turned into a skeleton, shining with the transformed metal light. In its eye sockets, 2 high-density energy flames are burning. Galactus weapon. Even if Eagle Eye couldn't see what it was specifically, he could still tell based on the sound that something big was flying high in the sky. The Red Skull said sadly, "Hawkeye, I know you can't see, so I reluctantly explain it to you. Now the Star Eater weapon has flown high into the sky and entered a charging state. With just one command, it will activate at full power, and the power of the Star Eater weapon can easily destroy the entire Earth. As for the activated device, it is now bound to my heartbeat." At this point, the Red Skull finally laughed wildly. He was actually a little scared just now. Hawkeye didn't wait for him to explain clearly, and he just took action. That would not be good. In order to let Hawkeye listen to him, the Red Skull specially added a beeping sound to the device on his chest. "Now it's finally okay. Hawkeye, I know you have always wanted to kill me and destroy the Devourer weapon. Now I'm standing in front of you, if you have the guts, do it. But I tell you, as long as my heart stops, the Devourer weapon will immediately start at full power, and then the whole Earth will have to be buried with me." This is the solution that Deathstroke gave to the Red Skull. When the opponent is a self-proclaimed hero, you can use morality to kidnap them. Now the Red Skull is bound to the Devourer weapon, and all the people on the earth have become his hostages. Who else dares to take action against him? And everyone must pray that the Red Skull will not have any accidents. Hawkeye's hand holding the bow and arrow trembled constantly. He didn't expect the other party to do this. No wonder this guy was so fearless and even dared to appear in front of him. Red Skull, you are so despicable. Hawkeye, don't you want to kill me? Come on, I'm here. Red Skull pulled his uniform and slowly approached Hawkeye's position. As expected, Hawkeye did not shoot the arrow. This is why you superheroes are doomed to fail. Red Skull sneered in his heart, always bound by a sense of morality, doing things timidly, unlike me, who is unstoppable. He tensed his muscles, burst out with amazing strength and speed, came to Hawkeye, grabbed his neck and dragged him out. Hawkeye subconsciously wanted to resist, holding an arrow and stabbing Red Skull's throat. But Hawkeye stopped before the arrow reached his throat. Can't kill Red Skull. Waste. Red Skull felt a little proud in his heart. The advice given by Deathstroke was really effective, and no one would dare to offend him again. His own dead end in the future was finally completely solved. The Red Skull can mock the whole world now. Now, who dares to kill me? Who dares to kill me? Who dares to kill me? Chapter 71. Boom. A thunder exploded in the sky. The energy chaos caused by the star-eating weapon caused the sky and earth to change color. The night sky that had been clear just a moment ago was suddenly filled with dark clouds, and then the sky seemed to be cracked with countless holes, and the heavy rain turned into a waterfall and poured down. In the heavy rain, the flames on Kadam's body were extinguished and countless white smoke filled the air. But the bird was completely unscathed. Bruce, you only have one chance. Kadam flew beside Bruce, and Deathstroke came from the rain. Deathstroke now feels that if you break your wand, you will no longer be able to resist. This is your chance. Create a non-existent weakness and deliberately give your opponent a loophole. This is the opportunity Bruce created for himself. But there is only one chance to sneak attack Deathstroke, and there is only one chance. Think carefully about the combination of spells you are going to use next, and deal with Deathstroke in one go. Kadam reminded Bruce in his ear, but there is no need to put too much pressure. If you fail in the end, I will just take you out of this world. Owls emphasize early on that they are here to travel, not to be saviors. This world is doomed to destruction and has nothing to do with them. Bruce was noncommittal about this point of view and focused on the first half of Kadam's sentence. Spell combo. Bruce heard Professor Flitwick talk about this when he was still at Hogwarts. This is a fighting technique used in wizard duels. By connecting different spells, you can always take the initiative in the duel. Bruce quickly imagined a spellcasting plan in his mind. First use the levitation spell to float the death knell in the air, then use the freezing spell to freeze it in the rain, and finally add a shot to break it apart. This is the most powerful combination of spells he can use right now. Bruce clenched his fists. He only had one chance. Deathstroke walked slowly, and he pulled out the two swords behind his back. One of them was the sword in the stone obtained from the Red Skull. This magical weapon that had been reduced to scrap metal, now in the hands of Deathstroke, has actually regained some of its magical power. The rain poured down on them, but the moment they approached the sword blade, they seemed to be cut by invisible force and naturally divided into two halves. It's like nature itself is bowing to the majesty of the sword in the stone. I don't like targeting kids, but employers are paying too much. Deathstroke's eyes were deep, staring at Bruce's slightly childish face. He has extensive experience fighting Batman, so we know that even a young Batman has endless possibilities to turn defeat into victory. Don't let your guard down until the last moment. He only asked me to take you back, but he didn't say that you must be unharmed. Deathstroke said, breaking your limbs and taking them back is considered completing the mission. The words fell. Deathstroke suddenly rushed towards Bruce. Because the speed was so fast, the rain on the spot didn't even have time to react, leaving behind a human silhouette. The two swords slashed and cut off the rain line. Bruce's eyes were blurred as two silver lines passed in front of him. He instinctively made an evasive action. However, Deathstroke's target was not him. But it was Kadam flying next to him. Deathstroke could never rest assured that this strange owl was immortal. When the sword blade struck Kadam, the owl's wings flapped, and his body seemed to be attracted and twisted by a particle. He disappeared from the place and then appeared several meters away. Teleportation, or the speed force. Deathstroke's move failed. He didn't know about apparition, but he had seen similar power. Just then, Bruce's voice sounded in his ears. Deathstroke instantly realized that he had chosen the wrong target. This owl was the bait. Leviosa. Taking advantage of Deathstroke's last move, Bruce used the long-awaited levitation spell. Success. Seeing Deathstroke's feet leave the ground, Bruce's subsequent spell combination immediately followed. The ice freezes. As the spell was uttered, the cold air filled the body of Death Knell, and the rain continued to freeze. In just the blink of an eye, he turned into a human-shaped ice sculpture and fell heavily to the ground. 4.5. Bruce also wanted to recite the cutting spell to turn the ice sculpture into debris, but at this moment, Kadam interrupted him. That's enough. The owl flew over and said in a serious tone, "We can go." Why? Bruce is extremely puzzled. Now that he has the upper hand, he only needs one cutting spell to completely defeat Deathstroke. Why should you stop yourself? The answer was soon revealed. Countless cracks began to spread on the ice sculpture of the Death Knell, and then like the sound of breaking glass, the ice sculpture turned into powder. Deathstroke stood in the icy rain, his armor unscathed. Bruce's pupils shrank, and he realized what the problem was. As Kadam had reminded him long ago, Deathstroke's armor was forged from promethium metal and was indestructible. Bruce's current magic cannot be destroyed at all. And even if the armor is destroyed through all the hard work, Deathstroke himself still has the ability to heal himself. Coupled with the resurgence of the sword in the stone in his hand, Deathstroke can now be said to be one of the strongest combat powers on this wasteland Earth. From the start, this was an unwinnable battle. On the other side, Hawkeye collapsed to the ground. The Red Skull held the Captain America shield and smashed it on him again and again. Ever since he knew that the Galactus weapon was bound to the Red Skull's life, Hawkeye became timid and confused, and the battle was naturally one-sided. "What's wrong, Hawkeye? Didn't you want to kill me? Why don't you talk now?" The Red Skull laughed wantonly, holding his favorite shield, enjoying the pleasure of killing. Hawkeye's pupils have begun to dilate, and his life is in the dying moments. As for Logan, he can't be found in any corner of this battlefield. Maybe he slipped away from the beginning of the battle. "We can't win, let's go." Kadam kept whispering in Bruce's ear, wanting to take him away from this world. Bruce stood in the pouring rain, despair spreading in his heart. Kadam boosted others' ambitions and destroyed his own prestige, a complete escape owl. Death Bell has only one weakness, that is, the super serum he once received is defective. When he loses control of his emotions and falls into a rage, or is seriously injured and heals too much, his mind will be occupied by madness and bestiality. Other than that, he is invincible. "Bruce, you can't win, run away with me." Kadam kept chattering, but Bruce became more and more irritated. What did this owl do before? Didn't he say that he was the king of demons? Why is he thinking about running away with a bucket? But, suddenly, a strange idea appeared in Bruce's mind. Does Kadam really want to take him away? Bruce knew very well that the owl didn't need his consent to take him away from this world. Just grab him, apparate to a safe place, then open the channel to the heavens, and leave naturally. But Kadam didn't do this. Not only that, he was even helping him analyze Death Bell's weaknesses. "Kadam, what are you thinking about? Let's go. If we don't leave now, we will have no chance." Quote. The owl chirped, looking like it was doomsday, but he still didn't make any move to leave, just kept talking. Bruce suddenly whispered, "Kadam, you actually think I can win, right?" He believed in his own judgment. Kadam felt that he could win. But the question was how to win. His magic was useless. Bruce couldn't find any possibility of winning. "I don't understand what you are saying." The owl was still shaking his head. "In a world that is about to be destroyed, what's the point of winning or losing? Be careful." Quote. Bruce suddenly realized that Deathstroke had come to him again without him noticing, and the shadow enveloped Bruce. Deathstroke raised both swords high, and was about to chop down. Deathstroke had always wanted to cut off Bruce's limbs and bring him to Barbados, and he was about to succeed. But at this moment, a huge roar came from behind Bruce. A red convertible chariot with high beams on roared through the white rain. "Bruce, get out of the way." The white-haired old man in the driver's seat shouted. His whole body was wet, and his eyes were burning with blood that would not cool down for 50 years. The chariot leapt over Bruce's head, knocking Deathstroke away from him. The chariot landed on the ground, and Logan stepped on the accelerator to the floor. The spider chariot roared towards the Red Skull with the death knell on its head. Deathstroke was almost furious. Why were there so many variables in such a simple task? He endured the impact of the spider chariot and stuck his swords on the ground, trying to stop the chariot. But his swords were so sharp that they easily cut through the ground without slowing down the attack. The Red Skull watched helplessly as a chariot rushed toward him, and he instinctively ducked aside. And Logan's target was not him in the first place. Logan turned the steering wheel hard, causing the spider chariot to stall and spin, and Deathstroke was thrown away. Then he leaned out and grabbed the bloody Hawkeye back into the back seat. The spider chariot roared back to Bruce. Logan jumped out of the car, grabbed Bruce with one hand and Katem with the other, and threw them into the car. "Can you drive?" Logan shouted loudly with rain on his face. "I can." Bruce responded equally loudly, "I studied in Hawaii." "That's good. You take Hawkeye and leave here. Don't worry about any pursuers, you must escape." Logan was extremely decisive. "It doesn't matter if you throw away Hawkeye at the critical moment, you have to survive." "What about you?" Bruce asked loudly. "Leave me alone." Logan turned around. Deathstroke had stood up again, his promethium metal armor leaving him unscathed. "I'm not leaving." Bruce was still shouting from behind. He couldn't leave Logan here alone. "Okay." Logan turned around and said, "You belong to another world, there is no need to be buried with this world." Those words caused all expression to drain from Bruce's face. "How do you know?" "I've known for a long time that children like you can't exist in this rotten world." Logan said loudly, "When a pervert in red tights came to me, I knew then that there was another universe." "Child, go back to your world. Don't you still want to be a hero? You can be a hero only by living." Bruce was speechless. Tears flowed from his eyes, mixing with the rain. Logan's determination made him understand that the old man's decision could not be changed. At least get Hawkeye out first. With such a mood, Bruce got into the driver's seat and hurriedly started to control the vehicle. Inadvertently, he touched the switch of the car audio. The rock music that Hawkeye had not finished playing began to play, and at this moment, it was disturbing to hear it. Bruce stepped on the accelerator and the spider chariot started. "Goodbye, kid." Logan didn't look back and let Bruce go away. Professor X's last words rang in his ears, "Our world will be destroyed, but he will remember us." "Remember my story. That's okay too." Logan stood upright in the rainstorm, looking at Deathstroke and the Red Skull not far away. "Sorry, this is closed to traffic." Bruce's mind went blank, and he drove the car mechanically in the rain. Both he and Katem were soaked in the rain, but they still couldn't stop. He at least wanted to find a safe place to put Hawkeye there. Hawkeye in the back seat had lost consciousness, and the blood on his body was soaked in rain. Bruce wrapped the cloak that Dumbledore had given him around him, hoping to maintain his body temperature. The whine of the car horn came from behind, and a row of black cars were chasing after them. They were the military police of the Red Skull. The spider chariot broke through the rain, and the branches on the roadside danced wildly in the rain. "Katem," Bruce shouted, "give me the Dionysian factor." Hawkeye couldn't hold on any longer, and he couldn't just watch Hawkeye die. "No point, Bruce." Katem's voice was deep. "Even if you revive him now, he will still die after the world is destroyed, and the Dionysus factor cannot be reversed." "I don't care," Bruce roared. A black car approached the spider chariot. Bruce turned the steering wheel and knocked the car away with the body. "I wonder how Logan is doing." Bruce is so anxious now that both Hawkeye and Logan are on the verge of death. At this time, the car stereo finished playing Hawkeye's rock music and started playing Logan's song. It was a very old song with lonely and painful lyrics. "I hurt myself again today. See if you're still conscious. Concentrate and feel the pain. The only thing that's real." Logan roared and rushed towards Deathstroke and Red Skull. He had numerous cuts on his body, but they healed quickly. When he again knew what he wanted to protect, Logan was no longer confused. He is still the Twilight Old Man, but he dares to use his body to block the most dangerous enemy. "Don't go after that boy. Logan hasn't fought in 50 years. Facing the most powerful mercenary, Deathstroke, he was almost powerless to fight back. Logan was knocked down time and time again, but stood up again and again. Why is there such a troublesome guy like you? Deathstroke's patience was almost worn out. He didn't hold anything back and wanted to kill the obstructive Logan as quickly as possible. But the result in exchange is that Logan's self-healing speed is getting faster and faster. Deathstroke didn't want to waste any more time. He clenched his swords, stabbed them into Logan's body, and then separated them with force. Logan was almost cut in half. With a plop, Logan fell to the ground and stopped breathing. Finally, this disgusting guy was dealt with. Deathstroke put away his swords, walked past Logan, and wanted to chase Bruce. His mission could have been completed, but such a guy popped up. Waste of time. However, just after Deathstroke took a step, his ankle was suddenly grabbed by someone and he could no longer move forward. It was Logan who caught him. The old man fell in a pool of blood and said in a very weak voice, "No passage here." He still said that he would never let Deathstroke catch up with Bruce. Logan is old and his life is about to end. The only thing he can do now is to use his old bones as firewood to ignite the flame of hope. "I don't know what you are insisting on," Deathstroke cursed. What to insist on? He didn't know either. But Bruce, that kid, said he wanted to be a hero. Logan laughed miserably, then coughed up blood. "To be a role model," Logan said weakly. "The spirit of heroes is like this, passed down from generation to generation." Death Bell took out a pistol from his waist, pulled the trigger, and the muzzle flashed, and the bullet shot into Logan's brain. "Role model," Death Bell sneered, "the era of idealism is dead, and it will never be rekindled again." He turned his head and continued to move forward. But at this moment, a sharp pain came from under his feet. Death Bell lowered his head, but saw a steel claw prying open the gap between his leg armor and deeply piercing his ankle. "This is..." Death Bell's pupils suddenly contracted. Ah! A wolf howl that had been silent for 50 years sounded again between heaven and earth. Logan suddenly exerted force and pulled out the steel claw. In the dripping blood, a burly body stood up, the sound of metal friction sounded, and he stretched out another adamantium steel claw that had been sealed for 50 years. In the car stereo, Logan's song has come to an end. "If I could start over, even if I was thousands of miles away, I would still be myself. Find my way to seek." Logan crossed his claws to form an X shape. The bullet from Deathstroke just now killed an old man, but awakened the superhero in him who had been dormant for 50 years. Logan is dead. Wolverine lives forever. Wolverine's wrists were covered with blue veins, and his aura had completely changed. It was like a rebirth, radiating unprecedented wildness and ferocity. At this moment, he abandoned all distractions, and with an almost fanatical determination and an unreserved attitude, he launched the most direct and fierce attack on the bell. The steel claws passed through the night, with a cold light, and the bell raised the sword to block. The collision of claws and swords exploded like thunder in the rainy night, and a series of sparks flashed in the darkness, embellishing the battlefield under the rain curtain. Wolverine howled to the sky. He did not give the bell any breathing space. The offensive was continuous, like a string of cannonballs. One hit did not fall, another hit rose. The steel claws shuttled through the rain curtain, cutting the heavy rain into pieces. Wolverine, with his own strength, set off a killing storm, forcing the bell to passively defend and never fight back. Even his proud Prometheum armor couldn't stop Wolverine's attack. The steel claws hit the armor, making a sound of metal and stone colliding, leaving 3 obvious scratches. Wolverine's steel claws are made of the purest adamantium alloy, which is no less than Prometheum metal. Crazy. Deathstroke's injured ankle has healed, but the balance of victory has not tilted towards him. He began to feel that he was not fighting a person, but a beast. A beast filled with strong murderous intent, with only prey in its eyes. Wolverine has thrown away all rationality and just wants to tear the enemy in front of him to pieces without leaving any room. Deathstroke clearly remembered that just a few minutes ago, the old man was still powerless to fight back against him. But after one shot, he suppressed himself and couldn't fight back. Why, is it really him, Deathstroke, who underestimated the heroes of the world? Deathstroke already knows his current situation clearly, and he must not be so passive. Thinking of this, he suddenly gave up defense. In such a fierce battle, Such behavior is tantamount to suicide. The wolf claws really attacked, and this time they directly tore through the helmet of the bell, revealing half of his face and the claw marks on his face that were deep enough to see the bone. At the same time, the bell turned his head and looked at the Red Skull not far away. Red Skull, why are you looking at me? There was no answer, he only saw a flash of cold light in front of him. The Red Skull's perspective began to fall continuously, all the way to the ground. He saw his body, still standing in the same place, and the Red Skull wondered, what kind of strange perspective is this? However, before he could figure it out, the Red Skull's thoughts had completely stopped. He died, and his head was cut off by the bell. At the moment when the Red Skull's heartbeat stopped, the devouring star weapon in the sky received the startup command. The weapon started at full power, and countless energy pulses were released uncontrollably. In an instant, the sky was thundering and lightning flashed, and the entire new utopia was affected. The space began to distort visibly, and the gravity around it also changed. Some vehicles parked on the roadside began to float into the sky. 10 minutes. Deathstroke raised his head and looked at Wolverine. In the next 10 minutes, whether you can kill me or not, you will be destroyed with the world. He forced a smile, and the scars on his face began to heal automatically. The destruction of the world is a kind of fate, which is not subject to human will. From the moment the devouring star weapon appeared, it was destined to get out of control, and now the Deathstroke just accelerated this process. Tonight, everyone is doomed. As for Bruce, Deathstroke is not worried at all. For guys who claim to be heroes, you can use moral sense to kidnap them. Bruce will come back. Otherwise, letting a world be destroyed in front of him is enough to become his eternal demon. Bruce's heroic path will be completely interrupted. The devouring star weapon was activated, and the vision affected the entire new utopia, and it was still expanding. The city was shaking, the sea was flooding, and the end of the world had come. Bruce drove the spider chariot and knocked away several cars approaching him. The remaining pursuers were gradually thrown away. Those people found something wrong and it was meaningless to continue chasing Bruce. The star-devouring weapon has been activated. Kadam looked back at the sky behind him. Bruce, we really have to go. The star-devouring weapon lost control in the sky, and the energy pulses that escaped could easily destroy a mountain range. This kind of power is no longer something that human power can contend with. They really should leave. However, after hearing this, Bruce did not respond. He pinched his knuckles white, and his fingers dug deep into the steering wheel. Bruce stared straight ahead, letting the rain wash his face. Can't hesitate, Bruce. Kadam sighed. There's really no time now, we can't do anything anymore. Nothing can be done. Bruce really didn't want to accept this reality. He always felt that if he chose to leave this time, he would never be able to let it go. Whether he fled in panic in the face of the bell or stood by and watched the world being destroyed, it was enough to become a mental disaster. This can't be done. Think. Bruce, you won't give up so easily. There is still time, think of a way to break the deadlock. The spider chariot sped away, and time passed bit by bit. The world has completely entered the countdown of destruction. Even the gravity around Bruce has problems. The soil, trees, and rocks on both sides of the road began to be sucked into the air and flew in one direction. The star-devouring weapon is like a huge black hole, which will devour everything on the earth. Such a crisis is definitely not something that Wolverine can solve. Bruce turned his head to look at Kadam, but found that Owl was also looking at him quietly. He was waiting for an answer. Kadam did not give any hints, because all the clues were already in front of Bruce. At this moment, everything that Owl had said appeared in Batboy's mind. Even those hell jokes. The way to salvation is in it. A thunder suddenly sounded in the sky, and Bruce's brain seemed to be struck by lightning. Everything in the past flew by like a revolving lantern, and Bruce was shocked. He figured it out. So that's it, everything is so simple. Bruce knew how to save this world on the verge of destruction. But the current situation is far from enough for him alone. For the first time, Bruce's 12-year-old face showed a resolute determination to face death. If you are confused, don't set out. But Bruce is no longer confused. He will not run away. He wants to save the world. Kadam. Bruce stretched out his hand to the owl. Give me strength. Kadam almost laughed out of anger. You really dare to speak. I told you that you were wasting your time. This world has already. Please, Godfather. At this moment, Kadam, who had insisted on running away, finally changed his tone. He sighed and said, I can only give you 10 times the strength. Your body can't bear more. Enough. Bruce nodded firmly, and the rain could no longer wash away his faith. Just like that day in the basement of Hogwarts, Kadam's wings enveloped him. One man and one bird, one body. The powerful force once again poured into Bruce's body. Bruce stepped on the brakes and stopped the car in the middle of the road. I am no longer the child who only cries in the alley. Bruce unbuckled his seat belt and climbed onto the roof of the car. He flipped his palm and a test tube containing Dionysus Factor appeared in his hand. He opened the lid and a drop of Dionysus Factor flew into Hawkeye's body. In the thinking space, Kadam closed his eyes. Although he was heartbroken, he pretended not to see anything. Hawkeye's broken body began to repair, and his weak breathing became strong again. The cloak wrapped around him flew up and landed on Bruce's shoulders, rustling in the rain. Bruce raised his head, his eyes seemed to penetrate this world on the verge of destruction. Now, I speak to the will of the world. Rumble. The violent thunder was connected, as if the will of the world was showing its existence. I am the heir of the Wayne family and the future Batman. I am also a student of Hogwarts. I have the courage of Gryffindor, the wisdom of Ravenclaw, the kindness of Hufflepuff, and the faith of Slytherin. Kadam nodded. And my optimism. Bruce raised his head and roared. I show you my qualities, you can trust me completely. If you still have a heart to save yourself, respond to my will. From the beginning of this journey of the heavens, Kadam told Bruce the purpose of this trip. To obtain the power to deny the world from outside the world. Now this world is on the verge of destruction, claiming that nothing can change it. Then let Bruce try. Let the visitors from outside this world try to change the predetermined fate. Bruce raised his hand and whispered. Mjolnir is coming. Thousands of kilometers away, in Hammerfall. The influence of the devouring star weapon has not spread here yet, and everything seems to be peaceful. In the center of the town, Thor's hammer, which had been silent for half a century, suddenly shook slightly. The shaking became more and more violent, as if it had finally broken through the shackles of 50 years. Thor's hammer floated out of thin air, and countless lightning wrapped around it. Boom! A thunderclap woke up all the residents of the town. They got up in panic and looked out the window. I saw a flash of lightning rising from the ground, rushing towards the boundless sky with the momentum of thousands of thunders. In the new utopia, dark clouds rolled in the sky and thunder gathered. When Bruce made that call, not even a second passed, and a thunderclap struck him. Bruce clenched his fist, the thunder dissipated, and a warhammer appeared in his hand. Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, obey the order. Bruce looked at the hammer, which was covered with cracks and almost on the verge of collapse. Maybe he could fight once more at most. But these same cracks were now constantly releasing lightning, and Bruce could even faintly feel the joy and desire coming from Thor's hammer. It was happy to be picked up again, and it longed for an unreserved battle. Bruce lowered his head and said to Thor's hammer, if you fail in the next battle, the world will be destroyed. This is not only your last battle, but also the last battle of the world. The hammer was thundering, and the blue lightning almost condensed into liquid, covering Bruce's whole body, forming a thunder suit. That was the appearance of Batman. Since you are ready, let's fight. Bruce suddenly raised his head, and his eyes burst into endless lightning. Fight for Logan's safety. Fight for my beliefs. Fight for the survival of the world. Fight, fight, fight. Bruce swung Thor's hammer violently, and the whole person turned into a flash of lightning, rushing in the direction where he had fled in a panic before. Today, he, Bruce Wayne, will fight his last battle for this world. After a few metal collisions, the two figures suddenly separated. Deathstroke wiped the blood stains from the corners of his eyes and sneered, it seems you can't kill me. At this time, several obvious cracks had appeared on his Promethium alloy armor. The originally indestructible defense finally had a gap. On the other side, Wolverine was breathing heavily. Although he could heal all his injuries with faith, he still felt the lack of physical strength after fighting so hard. Unfortunately, he had just picked up his superpowers again. If he could get used to it for a little more time, he could overcome the loss of physical strength. It's almost time. Deathstroke didn't want to pay attention to Wolverine anymore. The other party fulfilled his declaration, and Deathstroke did not leave here even a step. But now the world is about to be destroyed, everything is meaningless. Bruce hasn't come yet. Deathstroke couldn't help but think, is he really running away? If so, it would be too funny. Batman will never appear in the future. Just thinking this, Deathstroke saw a figure flying in the sky. Is he coming? Death Bell was delighted and felt relieved. Finally, he didn't need to continue fighting with Wolverine. Neither of them could do anything to the other, and they could only consume each other meaninglessly. Now that Bruce dared to come back, it was different. Just ignore Wolverine and take Bruce away. Death Bell clenched the sword in the stone in his hand. For some reason, a strange will came from the sword in the stone at this time. It seemed to warn Death Bell of danger. What's the situation? Death Bell had no time to pay attention to this change, because the figure had come close. Then he saw that behind the figure, there seemed to be a lightning storm like a thunderstorm. The other party's figure suddenly disappeared from the sky. Boom! A thunderbolt struck in front of Death Bell. He subconsciously dodged, but found that the thunderbolt turned into a human form in front of him. It was a Batman who seemed to be made of thunder and lightning. Who are you? Death Bell was really a little panicked this time. He had never seen Batman in this form. Could this be made by Bruce, who fled in panic? Who am I? Bruce's voice suddenly came from the body of thunder and lightning. I am Revenge. I am the Knight. Boom! Bruce held Thor's hammer tightly with both hands, swung it hard, and hit Deathstroke hard. The promethium metal suit blocked most of the damage, but the cracks on it inevitably missed several lightning bolts. Deathstroke coughed up blood and was knocked away by the huge impact force. The thunder flowed, making Bruce look like an adult. He shook his hand, turned Thor's hammer, and said coldly, I am Batman. Bruce swung the war hammer, and Deathstroke barely held the sword in the stone to his chest. Kang! Gold and stone clashed, and the death knell was pushed back dozens of meters again. Bruce's eyes were cold and he suddenly raised Mjolnir. In an instant, there was lightning and thunder in the sky. A dazzling bolt of lightning pierced the sky, like a sharp sword of a god, tearing apart the darkness instantly, followed by deafening thunder, like the roar of a giant beast, shaking the world. Bruce never loses. With a tenfold increase in the power of the God of Thunder, his probability of victory is now 1000%. A full-scale thunderstorm broke out, and lightning danced in the sky one after another. Accompanied by thunderous thunder, heavy rain poured down, as if the sky had poured out all its anger. Every drop of rain carries the power of thunder, hitting the ground violently, and also hits the embarrassed death knell. Deathstroke's armor could no longer withstand this power, and he struggled to raise the sword in the stone above his head, pulling the lightning. But this is just a temporary measure. If you continue, you will definitely lose. Why, I can't even defeat the 12-year-old Batman. Humiliation and anger overwhelmed Death Knell, and his eyes were stained with violence and madness. The flaws in the serum became apparent at this time, and Deathstroke's bestial nature began to take over his brain, just like Wolverine before him. Since there is no glimmer of hope as far as the eye can see, then try your best to find a glimmer of hope. Ah! The death knell roared and rushed towards Bruce. The sword in the stone was filled with murderous intent, and the power belonging to the gods gradually awakened. Bruce felt the pressure on his face, but had no idea of evading it. He swung Mjolnir and faced him head-on. Boom! The collision of divine powers pushed everything around out of this area, and even the dark clouds in the sky were shaken out of a big hole. The Thor's hammer in Bruce's hand suddenly fell into pieces. This collision has exceeded the limit that it can withstand now. Deathstroke's single eye widened, and a look of joy flashed across his face. He won? ? No, wrong. Deathstroke watched helplessly as countless fragments broken out of the warhammer were suspended in the air in a manner that violated the laws of physics. Each fragment flashed with lightning, and the arc connected them together, and the broken warhammer remained a whole. Mjolnir does destroy, but not now. Brush. Bruce didn't want to say more, and suddenly swung his arm. He had used all his strength now, without any reservation. The fragments and arcs of Thor's hammer formed a long whip that seemed to penetrate the heaven and earth, carrying the pressure of the sky and the earth collapsing, and struck at the death knell. Deathstroke had no way to hide, and could only watch as his field of vision was completely occupied by thunder. Click, click. Deathstroke withstood this attack firmly, and countless cracks began to spread on his armor, quickly covering his whole body. Immediately afterwards, the indestructible suit made of promethium metal suddenly disintegrated. Deathstroke lay on his back, coughing up blood, and fell to the ground. He's not dead yet, but he's close. Countless small arcs of electricity traveled through his body, constantly destroying his body. Even if Deathstroke had the ability to heal itself, it was of no avail. Every time he heals himself, the arc destroys it again, as if it never stops and is endless. After the previous blow, the fragments of Thor's hammer reunited and took the shape of a warhammer again. Bruce was no longer interested in taking another look at Deathstroke. He raised his head and looked at the Star Eater weapon high in the sky. At this time, the Galactus weapon has formed a powerful force field, pulling everything in and then wiping it into dust. The dust gathered together and formed a dust ring around the Galactus weapon. No time. Bruce bent his legs and leapt high into the air, the cloak behind him whirring as he flew towards the huge head. The thunder in the sky gathered into a river around him, and the thunder that shook the world was like the will of the world shouting unwillingly. At this moment, the star-swallowing weapon also noticed that an ultra-high energy object was approaching it. The protection system activates instantly. Those originally dissipated energy pulses were integrated together to form a torrent of energy, which was launched towards Bruce, intending to kill him in midair. On the ground, Wolverine covered his healing wound and looked at the sky, completely speechless. The torrent of energy and the thunder in the sky are about to collide. He couldn't say anything and could only bear witness silently. Whether this world can be saved will be revealed in the next few seconds. The moment the two energies came into contact, the whole world seemed to become quiet. Not a trace of sound was heard, because in this collision, even the air was obliterated, forming a vacuum zone. This collision is still going on. Bruce held Mjolnir tightly, pulling more thunder between heaven and earth, trying to break through the energy torrent of the Galactus weapon. But it's too difficult. He gritted his teeth and persisted, his arms kept shaking, and his body was already on the verge of falling apart. Even though he had tried his best, he was still a little short of the world-destroying level of power. A little bit, really just a little bit worse. Going to fail. Bruce roared. Even if he burned the last of his strength, he would push back the torrent of energy. He will never retreat. At this moment, it was as if heaven and earth responded to his faith. Bruce suddenly felt a strange and huge energy coming from behind him. This power has far exceeded the limit of the Devourer weapon. Bruce looked back and saw countless figures made of lightning standing up one by one in the sea of thunder. Among these figures, some held vibranium shields, some wore iron armor, some looked like gods, and some controlled chaos. The figures were endless. They were superheroes who had long passed away in this world. Their wills were immortal and they were now with Bruce. Even in a universe full of evil, justice cannot be killed. It was these heroes who provided Bruce with the strength to persevere. A figure came to Bruce, and from his eyebrows, Bruce recognized that it was Professor X, whom he had only met once. I have always wanted to see you, and now I finally got my wish. Professor X smiled and pressed Bruce's shoulder, giving him his own strength. Good boy, leave your back to us, don't worry about anything. Bruce suddenly realized that he had never fought alone. The moment he chooses to save the world, the whole world will stand on his side. Bruce turned his head, and the power in his body was boiling endlessly. At this moment, he was no longer Batman, or rather, he was not just Batman. With Bruce's roar, the torrent of destruction was completely dispersed. With the fluttering cloak and the roar of thunder, Bruce rushed towards the star-devouring weapon with the will of the whole world. Is it a moth to a flame, or to save the world? The souls of those heroes are watching Bruce, waiting for the final outcome. Professor X smiled, with boundless relief and trust in his eyes. Fly forward boldly, little bat. This is a trial. Whether Bruce really has no confusion will be revealed at this moment. With the blessing of the will of the entire world, Bruce came to the Galactus weapon without any hindrance. He held Mjolnir tightly in both hands, and with a decisive and unparalleled attitude, he swung a blow that severed the line of fate. Is the end of the world a fixed destiny that cannot be changed? Then Bruce will test himself to prove this statement is wrong. Boom! A hammer that shook the universe struck hard on the Galactus weapon. It was no longer possible for the star-eating weapon to maintain a stable state. Under the influence of the huge impact force, it flew towards the atmosphere. And Bruce hovered in the air, opened his palms, and a huge passage in the heavens appeared in the orbit of the Galactus weapon. The Galactus weapon entered the passage and left this world. At this moment, the countdown to destroy the world has reached the last second. The power of Galactus completely exploded in the tunnels of the heavens, but soon fell silent. This force is indeed powerful enough to destroy a world. But placed in the universe, it is still too small. Bruce's plan succeeded, and he sent the power to destroy the world outside the world. The crisis that cannot be changed in fate was successfully changed by him. Everything calmed down, the thunderstorm subsided, and the figures of those heroes began to disappear. Bruce's performance reassured them to embrace peace. Professor. The dark clouds slowly dispersed, revealing the bright night sky. Bruce landed on the ground, the power of Thor was stripped from his body, and the warhammer in his hand turned into fragments and scattered all over the ground. Mine, mine, it's all mine. Bruce's chest rippled, and the owl flew out of it. He landed near the fragments of the hammer and collected them piece by piece into his feathers. The combined state was released, and Bruce suddenly felt endless fatigue. He fell on his back, gasping for air. I succeeded. He said weakly, I really succeeded. This success means a lot to him. If the established doomsday can be changed, then changing Gotham is no longer just a dream. It is possible. Bruce shed tears without regret. Choosing to travel around the world was indeed the right choice. Kadam was too busy picking up the pieces of the hammer to care what Bruce was thinking. By the time he finished picking up the pieces, Bruce's mood had stabilized. Why are you crying? Kadam asked curiously. At this time, he had flown to the other side and picked up the Captain America shield dropped by the Red Skull. Nothing. Bruce was still lying on the ground. Although his mood had stabilized, his physical strength was still severely exhausted. For a while, he couldn't sit up. At this moment, he suddenly thought of a question. Kadam, have you lied to me before? Bruce asked. You said that my body can withstand up to 10 times the force, but the strength given to me by those seniors just now is far more than 10 times. So what if I lied to you? Kadam said indifferently, I usually like to tell little lies, but that's not the point. The point is that we prevented the destruction of the world. Okay, whatever you say. Bruce doesn't want to worry about this anymore, he just wants to have a good rest now. Kadam was still searching for loot everywhere, but as he was flying, he suddenly let out a strange scream. Oops. Bruce's attention was drawn and he turned around and asked, what's wrong? The death knell is missing. Kadam pointed in a certain direction, and the place where Deathstroke should have been lying was already empty. But the pieces of Deathstroke's armor remained. Probably he went back. Bruce didn't find it strange. When Jason went back before, he also disappeared in the same place. In fact, Kadam didn't care about Deathstroke at all. The problem was that Deathstroke still held the sword in the stone. Now he has disappeared with him. Loss of blood. It would be better if we really go back. Kadam is reminded of the sword in the stone's ability to split the barriers of the multiverse, only in Marvel, of course. It would be fun to watch if Deathstroke didn't return to DC, but used the sword in the stone to escape to other Marvel universes. But no matter what, the sword in the stone is out of reach anyway. Kadam comforted himself that it was not a loss to get promethium metal. He flew over to the fragment of armor and picked up one. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. The promethium metal in Kadam's wings suddenly began to tremble uncontrollably, and vaguely resonated with the Dionysus factor in Kadam's body. Then a ray of light flew out of the promethium metal and hit the sky. At this moment, the originally calm night sky was once again covered in haze, and the strange and ominous atmosphere almost solidified. What's going on? Kadam turned around, saw the edge of the sky, and suddenly opened his eyes. A figure wearing a huge black cloak appeared, instantly covering the entire sky. The twisted and terrifying figure under the cloak was staring at Bruce lying on the ground. The sudden terrifying atmosphere made Bruce sit up. Barbados. He called the name. The figure in the sky at this time is undoubtedly the bat god Barbados. He's already chasing after him. Kadam frowned, quickly saw clearly, and shouted, Don't worry, it's a projection. It was indeed a projection, not Barbados himself. The owl looked at the promethium medal in his hand. It seemed that it was no coincidence that the two medals were sent to Bruce. It was arranged intentionally by Barbados. Bruce. At this time, Barbados in the projection slowly called out the name, his voice revealing endless evil and desire. Barbados opened his palms, and a black flower bloomed in his palms. On top of each petal stood a figure, also staring intently at Bruce. "You can't escape," Barbados declared in a distorted voice. "You can't escape." The figures on the petals also said this sentence at the same time. Kadam could see clearly that there were no more or less figures, exactly 7. This is the Dark Knights of Barbados, 7 Batmans from the Dark Multiverse. Every Dark Batman corresponds to a veteran of the Justice League. Corresponding to Superman, the Ravager with the power of Doomsday. Corresponding to Wonder Woman, the ruthless Iron Fist who masters the power of the God of War. Corresponding to the Flash, the Red Death running in the Speed Force. Corresponding to Green Lantern, the Daybreak Lantern that activates the Lights Out plan. Corresponding to Neptune, the drowned soul that floods the entire world. Corresponding to Cyborg, he sees the world as a killing machine of viruses. And the last heavyweight, the combination of Joker and Batman, the Laughing Bat. Now their projections appear at the same time, just to announce one thing to Bruce Wayne. There is nowhere for you to escape. We will eventually take you back. Bruce raised his head and remained silent. He had heard Kadam talk about the Dark Knights, but he didn't expect to see them so soon. Are these Bruce Wayne's parallel world selves? But how did they become like this? Bruce was still thinking about this problem, but Kadam had already flown next to him. What are you still hesitating about? Barbados is mocking us. The owl cursed and said, "If you don't attack them, I will attack you." You don't need to tell me. Bruce threw the thoughts out of his mind without any hesitation. So what if he was in a parallel world? Now they are the enemy. You even dare to show off your power in front of me. Do you really think that you have no temper? Bruce stared at Barbados and his 7 Batman in the sky with determination. He raised his hand, extended his middle finger, and stood upright. My destiny will only be controlled by myself. Bruce said coldly to the sky, none of you can decide my future. What about 7 Batmans? Just a bunch of orphans. Barbados's projection didn't last long. It quickly disappeared. He originally wanted to show his coercion in front of Bruce and make him fear his existence. But he didn't expect that this little bat that escaped from under his nose would grow so much in just 1 year. Bruce is afraid of bats, but not the bat god. Barbados's projection dispersed, and the sky returned to its original appearance. The city of New Utopia is now in a mess, but there are some new things in this world. It's called hope. Bruce. An exhausted Wolverine came to Bruce's side. He was still shocked by what had just happened, and could not recover for a long time. The figure from the Dark Multiverse has exceeded Wolverine's knowledge. Those are your enemies? Wolverine asked with wide eyes. Have you been facing this kind of thing? He couldn't imagine how Bruce could survive until now in the face of such a terrifying enemy. Bruce looked very free and easy. There's nothing to worry about, Uncle Logan, I'm not fighting alone. All right. Wolverine accepted this statement. After all, he had just seen with his own eyes the scene of countless heroic spirits blessing Bruce. Maybe this child should have flown to a wider sky. But Wolverine lowered his head and saw the owl that always followed Bruce, clawing at his steel claws. It seemed that he wanted to see if he could pull one out. He, little owl, this is not something you can play with. Everything has settled down, and Wolverine has relaxed and is even in the mood to joke with the owl. He retracted the steel claw, picked up Kadam, and placed him next to Bruce. Then he clenched his fist, stretched out and retracted the steel claw, repeated several times, and showed it in front of Kadam. This is a part of my body that only I can control. Wolverine looked at Edmund's steel claws and sighed, I never thought that one day I would take action again. At this time, Wolverine no longer looked as old as before. Due to the recovery of his self-healing factor, a few black hairs even appeared between his temples. This situation made Kadam a little dissatisfied. What are you talking about? It's just a pair of mediocre steel claws. You are the only one who is a treasure. Expelliarmus. Owl suddenly recited a disarming spell on Wolverine. With a swish sound, Wolverine's claws suddenly retracted automatically, which immediately shocked him. This situation only happened when Magneto was alive. On the other side, Kadam looked quite disappointed. It turns out that the disarming spell can only do this. Dee. Suddenly, a car horn sounded in the distance. Bruce and the others turned around and saw that it was Hawkeye driving the spider chariot back. What happened? Hawkeye yelled from a distance. His last memory was when he was beaten by the Red Skull and then lost consciousness. By the time I woke up, it was all over. Inexplicably, he won again. The spider chariot stopped on the roadside, and Hawkeye ran over waving his hand, feeling like Ultraman's human body. Only when he got closer did Wolverine realize something was wrong with Hawkeye. Clint, your eyes. You discovered it. Eagle Eye smiled. He was not wearing sunglasses at this time, revealing a pair of black eyes. His glaucoma is gone. I don't know why, but my vision returned as soon as I woke up. Hawkeye shook his head and said with a smile, "It's such a shame that I can't tell my favorite blind man joke anymore." After that, he winked at Bruce. Apparently he actually knows why. A few days have passed since the end of the world. The power vacuum created by the death of the Red Skull was quickly occupied by new villains. They were complacent about this, thinking that their territory had been expanded and the good times would continue. Early in the morning, Bruce woke up from the hotel and saw Kadam unpacking something on the table. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Look into waste utilization." Kadam shook the parts in the wings. It was the web launcher that once belonged to Spider-Man, but it had been scrapped. A few days ago, the owl crashed into the Red Skull's showroom like a tornado. Loot, oh no, sees everything inside. He originally thought he would get a bunch of good things, but after inspection, he found that most of them had become waste. But the owls still collected them all. So what if it is waste? He believes that as long as it is used properly, even a piece of toilet paper can exert its value. Take some time to clean up, the time is almost up. Bruce reminded him and then went to wash up. After finishing cleaning up, he went downstairs with Owl, where the spider chariot was parked in front of the hotel. Wolverine and Hawkeye were already sitting on it. "Bruce, are you really not coming with us?" Wolverine asked. "I'm going back, Uncle Logan." The reason why Bruce got up early was to say goodbye to these two old men. Oh no, it is no longer accurate to say that they are old people. Both Wolverine and Hawkeye are no longer aging at this time and are showing signs of returning to youth. "That's okay." Wolverine nodded. "What we are going to do next is indeed not suitable to take you with us. Because it is too bloody. Although the crisis of world destruction has been resolved, the supervillains will not disappear on their own. Those reckless guys are still causing pain to people. A new era has arrived. It is no longer tolerated that these fools exist in this world where there is still hope. Wolverine and Hawkeye are going to kill. Then let's say goodbye here." Hawkeye waved to Bruce and asked, "Will we meet again, Bruce?" "Maybe." Bruce could only answer vaguely. After all, he didn't know the answer. Hawkeye chuckled and didn't ask to the end. As a superhero, he has long been accustomed to saying goodbye. With a step on the accelerator, the spider chariot roared away, leaving only Bruce waving. "What a pity," Kadam suddenly said. "I actually want this car too." "That's enough, you've looted enough." Bruce shook his head and said, "Okay, open the tunnel to the heavens, we should leave." A cave appeared in front of Bruce. He was about to go in when he suddenly remembered something. "Wait," he said, "I haven't given Uncle Logan the $10,000 I promised him yet." Too late. The owl attacked Bruce bravely from behind and knocked him into the cave. Then, the figures of a man and a bird disappeared completely from this world. In the tunnel of the heavens, Bruce returned along the way he came. Then he asked a key question. "Kadam, you won't throw me into the orphanage again this time, will you?" Fortunately, Bruce's worries did not come true. He now returned to London in the Harry Potter world, and there was an office building in front of him. Not the orphanage you imagined. However, Bruce looked around, only to find that the place looked more and more familiar. "Kadam," he roared angrily, "isn't this the former Wu's orphanage? How dare you say you didn't arrange it? It's not like I've gone to a new world, so I don't need to arrange a new identity at all." Kadam had already flown high into the sky and defended himself loudly, "Don't slander me. The first 2 times were really not arranged by me." He felt a little regretful that he had miscalculated. Who would have thought that just 1 year later, Wu's orphanage would be demolished? The plan is less than perfect. Bruce was furious and insisted that everything was arranged by Kadam. But what Kadam said next gave him no time to be angry. Stop standing there stupidly. The owl suddenly said, you said you would bring gifts to those friends before, did you bring them? Bruce was suddenly stunned and asked, didn't you plunder so many things? Those are my treasures, how could I let you give them away? The owl sighed and pointed to the gift shop on the roadside with its wings, go and buy it there. As long as you remember to remove the label, no one will find it. Bruce returned to his aunt's house carrying large and small bags. When he opened the door, Hermione immediately greeted him with surprise and gave him a warm hug. Welcome home. On the other side, Mrs. Granger had a look of reproach on her face as she took the shopping bag from Bruce's hand. What gifts are you bringing home? Aren't you wasting money? Bruce waved his hand and said, it's okay, it's okay. I picked these randomly in the United States and didn't spend much money. He emphasized, in the United States. Kadam sneered twice. If he hadn't reminded him, let's see what the little bat would have done this time. In terms of worldliness, Bruce still has to rely on him. Bruce's trip this time basically took up the entire summer vacation. When he returned, it was almost time for Hogwarts to start. It was time to buy new textbooks for the new school year, so Hermione made an appointment with him to go shopping in Diagon Alley. Bruce was fine with that. The time came in a blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Bruce and Hermione went out together, and Mr. Granger was already waiting in his car outside. Where's Kadam? Hermione noticed that the owl did not come out with Bruce. It's okay, he'll be out soon. As soon as Bruce finished speaking, he saw an owl flying out of the window. He was so excited that he shouted to Bruce from a distance, "Ho ho, your dad is coming." Bruce covered his forehead and pretended not to hear anything. All the problems stem from the call he made to Godfather last time. At first, Kadam didn't realize anything, but when he came back to his senses, he became like this. I don't know when it will stop. When the family got into the car, the two children were still sitting in the back seat. Hermione enthusiastically introduced to Bruce the information she had learned about Hogwarts during the summer vacation. I've been writing to my friends, like Harry and Ron, by the way, do you know them? Bruce nodded. I know them. That's good. Hermione continued, Ron's father works at the Ministry of Magic, so he knows some inside information. He told me that Dumbledore often went to the Ministry of Magic this summer and seemed to be submitting some application. Hearing this, Bruce became interested. What application? I'm not sure about this. It seems to be related to teaching. Hermione recalled the content of the letter. It seems that Dumbledore wants to open more classes at Hogwarts. Then what's there to apply for? Bruce shook his head. The Ministry of Magic's influence in Hogwarts was limited. Dumbledore did not need the permission of the Ministry of Magic if he wanted to start classes. There must be other reasons. He raised his head and asked the owl, Kadam, what do you think is the reason? Isn't this very simple? Kadam said directly, it is impossible for the Ministry of Magic to remain indifferent to such a big thing last school year. Maybe Dumbledore will be laid off this year and he went to the Ministry of Magic to plead for mercy. I heard your nonsense. Bruce immediately knew that Kadam was talking nonsense. Although he was not entirely on Dumbledore's side, he also believed that it was impossible for Hogwarts to change its principal at this time. Forget it, there is too little information now to make any guesses reliable. You will naturally find out when school starts. It's still the same old road, passing through the leaky cauldron and arriving at Diagon Alley. When the group of them entered Diagon Alley, they went to Gringotts first to exchange money. When she walked out of Gringotts, Hermione's eyes suddenly lit up, and then she waved and shouted. Harry, Harry, come here. She spotted her friends and ran down to greet them, her fluffy brown hair flying behind her. The person who came was none other than Harry Potter. He was dusty and looked like he had crawled out of the fireplace. He didn't know what he had done. Next to him was the big man Hagrid, with a sullen expression on his face. Just now he was listening to Harry's tragic summer vacation. Harry, let me introduce you. Hermione brought Harry over. This is my cousin Bruce Wayne. Bruce, this is Harry. Hello. Bruce shook hands with Harry. Hello, Harry said timidly. In fact, They knew each other's existence in school, but they had never met each other formally. Harry knew even more clearly that Wayne was an extremely outstanding student, and every professor praised him highly when talking about him. Just then, the Weasley family ran over from a distance. They were relieved when they saw Harry. "Harry," Mr. Weasley panted, "Molly is going crazy, she'll be here soon." The people behind him chattered, and Bruce roughly understood what had just happened. Harry used the flow powder and read the wrong destination. After a while of confusion, Bruce officially met the Weasley family. After everyone dealt with various things, they decided to go to Flourish and Blotts together. When they arrived at the destination, they were surprised to find a large group of people crowded outside the store, all wanting to go in. A large banner was pulled out in front of the upstairs window. "Gilderoy Lockhart, autographed for sale, autobiography, The Magic Me." "I heard that Mr. Lockhart has something big to announce today," Hermione said excitedly. She did not hide the fact that she was a fan of Lockhart. It was difficult to get into the bookstore, so Bruce could only wait in line outside. Just then, Kadam suddenly said in his ear, "Bruce, look at that person." "Who?" Bruce turned his head and saw an old wizard, who was waiting at the door of the bookstore with an impatient look on his face. He was muttering something in his mouth, as if he wanted to cast a spell to expel everyone, but in the end he forced himself to hold it back. The old wizard's appearance was very memorable. His two eyes were different colors, as if there were two souls living in his body. The suitcase in his hand was the one used by Hogwarts professors. Bruce saw the name on the suitcase. Gale Green. Because the name is so straightforward, if you want to know the identity of the old wizard, you don't even need to use the word guess. Gale Green. Gellert Grindelwald. Did Dumbledore finally break him out of prison? And judging from the suitcase in his hand, he might even be teaching at Hogwarts. Thinking back to what Hermione said just now, this is what Dumbledore is busy with this summer. However, at this moment Bruce suddenly raised his head and said, "What happened to the wizard?" Kadam was confused. With such obvious clues, why didn't Bruce recognize who the other party was? Impossible. Bruce has read the history of magic and is very familiar with Grindelwald's deeds. Bruce should be able to recognize the famous heterochromatic eyes, the barely concealed name, and the temperament that is different from ordinary wizards at first sight. But the result was no. When did Batboy's reasoning skills become so bad? So the owl asked, "When you saw that person's name, you didn't think of him?" Bruce shook his head. "No, but looking at the suitcase, he should be a professor at Hogwarts." But it's nothing surprising. Hogwarts has faculty changes every year. Last year's Two-Face Quirrell has been successfully promoted to Azkaban this year. Maybe this old wizard is the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Judging from his age, he should have some experience in how to defend against dark magic. Kadam nodded, and from Bruce's tone, he probably guessed what was going on. It seems that Grindelwald did not make any disguise. He must have cast a spell on his name so that others would not be aware of his identity. As for why Kadam was not affected, very simple. Because owls are not people. The queue of people gradually moved forward, and they saw Gilderoy Lockhart. He sat behind a desk, surrounded by large photographs of himself, faces winking at the crowd, flashing dazzlingly white teeth. This is a very charming man. Bruce can vaguely see the grandmothers, aunts, sisters and sisters around him, with pink hearts sprouting from their heads. Not even Hermione and Mrs. Weasley. Bruce's vigilance suddenly rose. Not simple, this man is anything but simple. Able to attract women of all ages indiscriminately, it is difficult for Bruce not to think of the legendary succubus. A grumpy little man held up a large black camera and jumped back and forth taking pictures. Miraculously, every time the flash came on, Lockhart could face the camera and show a perfect smile. Isn't this Harry Potter? Suddenly, Lockhart spotted Harry among the crowd. He rushed forward, grabbed Harry's arm, and pulled him forward, and the audience burst into applause. The legendary boy who lived was actually a fan of his, which made him extremely satisfied, and he pulled Harry to take several photos before giving up. There was a cold snort from the second floor. Bruce looked up and found that it was Malfoy. He looked a little haggard at this time. He was obviously only 12 years old, but he seemed to be stained with countless troubles. It seems that the resurrection of Slytherin and Voldemort gave their family a headache all summer long. Cadum also spotted Malfoy and said, "Brother Drag, why are you unhappy again?" "Maybe he's jealous of Harry's fame," Bruce said casually. At this moment, there was a burst of cheers from the crowd. Lockhart just announced the big news that he will be the defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts this year. Lockhart would be a teacher. Bruce already knew that, because there were 7 more books on the Hogwarts textbook list this year. Breaking with the Female Ghost, Traveling with the Ghouls, Holiday with the Dominatrix. It's all Lockhart's autobiography. I just didn't expect it to be the defense against the dark arts teacher. Bruce was holding a book in his hand, Wandering with Werewolves. After opening it, the words inside made him frown. If you talk about the content alone, it is indeed valuable, especially the incisive analysis of various monsters and the methods of dealing with them, both of which are accurate and efficient. However, in addition to these dry facts, almost every page in the book is filled with Lockhart's endless praise and self-beautification of himself. Bruce was not a fan of Lockhart, so it was a bit uncomfortable to watch. He closed the book, but Cadum on his shoulder shouted, "Don't close it, I was just enjoying it. Can you continue reading this kind of book?" Bruce asked. "Is there anything I can't read?" Cadum said indifferently, "Can't you just pretend to be Lockhart?" Bruce had no choice but to hand the book to Cadum. The owl opened the book on his shoulder and read it with interest. What's going on with this Lockhart? Bruce felt like he couldn't see through this person. It seems like a waste, but what he wrote is very valuable. Bruce rubbed his eyes, doubting the way he looked at people. "Can't you understand?" The owl turned the page and said without raising his head, "Lockhart will be a good teacher. You will learn extremely important skills from him." "What skills?" Bruce asked. "How to weave a character." After the book signing, a small friction broke out in Flourish and Blots. Malfoy and Harry had a conflict, and then the conflict spread to Ron's sister, Ginny. The conflict continued to escalate until the adults on both sides left. Malfoy's father, Lucius, took Ginny's Transfiguration textbook and mocked their family for being the scum of wizards and deserved to be poor. This sentence was obviously too much. Ginny's father, Arthur, directly fought with him. When Hagrid pulled the two apart, Mr. Weasley's lip was already broken, and one of Mr. Malfoy's eyes was swollen by the book. At this time, in Lucius's hand, he still held the textbook he had just taken from Ginny. He threw the book into Ginny's cauldron as if nothing had happened, and finally left a mocking sentence and left with his son. Cadum was watching from the side. He was curious whether Voldemort would find the Malfoys and take the diary after his resurrection. Now it seems that he will not, maybe he just can't find the opportunity. There is still one more diary in Ginny's cauldron. "Voldemort, Voldemort, it's your blessing to have a subordinate like Malfoy." Cadum turned his head and looked at the other side of the bookstore, where Grindelwald was selecting textbooks and had never paid attention to this conflict from beginning to end. "Go." Cadum quietly waved his wings, and Voldemort's diary disappeared from the crucible. Instead, there was something more in Grindelwald's suitcase. "Tom, don't thank me," Cadum said contentedly, "your greater blessing is still to come." No one noticed Cadum's little move. After the confrontation in the bookstore, Mr. Weasley apologizes to the Grangers. He repeatedly emphasized that not every wizard is like Lucius, and Weasley is willing to be friends with Muggles. Mr. Granger smiled and waved his hand and said it was nothing. Discrimination in the Muggle world was also very common. They said goodbye in front of Flourish and Blots bookstore. On the way home, Mrs. Granger couldn't help but express her opinion. "I don't like the Malfoy family," she said. "I always thought that Draco would bully Hermione at school." Mr. Granger agreed. "I have seen many such things. In the past, white children always bullied African Americans and Asians in school. Even if you don't take action directly, there are many ways. Insult, sarcasm, isolation." Thinking that something like this might happen to Hermione, Mr. Granger couldn't help but feel worried and distressed. Bruce quickly reassured them. "Don't worry, I'm here." Mrs. Granger quickly said, "Bruce, you must not do anything that violates school rules." "Don't worry, Aunt, I'm sensible. As long as you don't let the school know, it's not a violation of school rules. And in the wizarding world, wizard duels are legal. If Malfoy dares to discriminate against Hermione, just wait until Bruce asks him to have a fight. When Bruce returned to his room, Cadam immediately flew to the table and opened Lockhart's autobiography. I have to say that Lockhart's writing style is really good, and the owl enjoyed reading it anyway. Cadam, what did you mean by what you just said? At this time, Bruce asked the question hidden in his heart. What do you mean? Lockhart will teach me how to weave characters. You should have figured it out by now, right? Cadam said without looking up. Lockhart is a big loser. Really? Bruce nodded. He couldn't feel the slightest aura of a strong man on Lockhart. But there is really nothing wrong with the experience described in Lockhart's book. That's right. Lockhart is obviously not strong, but he can gain such a great reputation, and even has the 3rd level medal of Sir Merlin. The reason is because he is good at weaving characters. In other words, although Lockhart is not good at magic, he is a genius when it comes to marketing. Cadam brings out his toilet paper theory again. Even a piece of toilet paper has its own value. Lockhart's value lies in marketing. Bruce was a little disapproving. What is the use of this ability? What's the use? It's so useful. The owl screamed strangely. Here, let me give you an example. After that, he took out Captain America's shield from the feather. During the process of taking it out, the owl was almost trapped inside because the shield was so big. Look, this is Captain America's shield. It's a valuable thing, right? Bruce nodded. He was fine with that. This is a weapon that even the President of the United States, the Red Skull, regards as a treasure, and is of course extremely valuable. Cadam said. Now let's assume that the value of this shield is 100 owl coins. What is an owl coin? Bruce asked. Don't worry about it. Cadam turned the topic back to the Captain America shield, but we have to admit that the reason why this shield is so famous is that its former owner was the superhero Captain America. Otherwise, it would be just a vibranium shield without any legendary value. In this world now, no one knows who Captain America is, so I can only give 10 owl coins for the value of this shield. Bruce frowned and said, Isn't this too much of a difference? I'm putting it lightly. The owl shook his head. However, we can now change the way to give this shield its legendary value again. How to give it? It's very simple. Just make up a story. Cadam thought for a while and said, It just so happens that the most powerful magician in this world is not Merlin. He is closely related to King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table. From today on, this shield is no longer Captain America's shield, but a holy relic left by the Knights of the Round Table where they held their meeting. After saying that, Cadam stretched out his wings and pointed at the shield. The stars and stripes pattern on the shield immediately disappeared, replaced by the Holy Grail pattern guarded by 12 knights' swords. Cadam said happily, Look, now the legendary value of this shield has returned. But Bruce still had some doubts. Is this shield too small? How can it be a table? Use your brain, Bruce. Cadam reminded, You can do magic. Isn't it your decision to make the shield bigger or smaller? When the last trace of doubt was resolved, Bruce suddenly became cheerful. He began to understand what the power of language is. A suitable story and an effective character can indeed play and role beyond imagination. Cadam, I understand. Bruce said, You used a branch to lie to me that it was the supreme wand. It's the same reason, right? Hey, why are you talking? Cadam quickly corrected him. Everything else can be fake, but the supreme wand is real. The remaining time passed quickly and it was time to return to Hogwarts. Bruce packed his luggage, took the new supreme wand given by Cadam, and set off with Hermione to the 9 3/4 station. This new supreme wand was different from the previous one. The handle of the wand was transformed from the handle of Thor's hammer. Cadam was very proud of this. Although the efforts of the Demon King are already powerful enough, I don't mind changing the material so that it will be more powerful. The handle of Thor's hammer is made of the World Tree. Bruce didn't know what it was exactly, but it sounded amazing. It was better than the sycamore wood that he had just broken off before. Soon, Bruce arrived at the 9 3/4 station and found a box with Hermione to sit down. Bruce, Hermione. At this time, Neville came over, his expression a little anxious. Did you see Harry and Ron? They don't seem to be on the bus. Cadam tilted his head, feeling a little strange. Why did Neville have to look for things on the bus every school year? What happened to them? Hermione was a little worried. She stood up and ran out with Neville. Bruce didn't follow because Katem told him not to worry. Then, just after Hermione left, an old wizard dragged a box to the door of the box. Is there any vacant seat here? He looked at Bruce and asked, can an old man be allowed to squeeze in with you? Bruce turned around and found that it was Professor Gale Green, whom he had met at Flourish and Blots. Of course, he said, please sit down. Thank you. Professor Green sat in the empty seat. He didn't put the box on the luggage rack, but leaned against his feet. The box occasionally trembled, as if there was something alive. Bruce looked at it in confusion, and Gale Green showed a harmless smile. Don't worry about it, he said, there are only some teaching equipment inside. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.